You wake before the light has fully gathered itself. The air is cool, but not sharp, just a lingering softness that makes you breathe slowly. Around you, mats shift with the weight of others rising, or not quite rising, only stretching like shadows trying to decide whether to move. The village compound feels both asleep and already awake, a state where nothing presses and everything waits. The sound you notice first is not loud, it is the cooing of doves. Faint, repetitive, close enough to blend with the rustle of someone pulling their cloth tighter. Their cooing loops in circles again and again, never hurrying. The longer you hear it, the more it seems like the whole compound beats to that same low rhythm. You do not move quickly. There is no reason. You simply sit, elbows resting on your knees, letting your eyes follow the first shapes becoming visible as dawn creeps past the walls. The dirt of the compound floor feels cool under your soles. You press your toes lightly into it, leaving shallow impressions that crumble back to flatness almost immediately. The scent of the earth is soft, dry, not sharp at all, as though the night has erased anything that might have been harsh. The huts that ring the yard sit quiet, each with its doorway dark, each with a low roof that hides its secrets until the day makes them obvious again. Somewhere near, a child coughs, not in sickness, only in the way a throat clears itself after stillness. A mother hushes him with a word you do not catch, the syllables stretched into calm shapes. You notice how language feels like part of the air here, drifting without urgency. Even when it holds command, a chicken scratches faintly against wood, the sound tiny, as though afraid to announce itself before the sun. Your eyes lift to the sky above the walls. It has not decided on color yet. The line where earth meets horizon is only a suggestion, not drawn fully, more like charcoal smudged and then forgotten. The first sliver of light does not blaze. It peels itself out in thin strips, pale and flat. There is no drama in it. The light arrives as though it has been here all along and simply chose now to make itself visible. In one corner of the yard, a gourd leans against a wall. Its curve glistens slightly with dew, not much, only enough that when you blink you notice the faint shimmer before it dries away. Beyond it, the fence of woven sticks cuts lines against the sky. The fence is not strong, not intended to be. It is only suggestion again, telling goats and children to think twice before wandering, but not truly holding anyone back. The mats where men slept lie folded or half-folded. You watch someone roll one with the slow care of a person who has no schedule waiting. He smooths it once, then again, as though the pattern of palm fibers deserves his attention more than anything the day might bring. He leaves it propped against a wall where shadows hold it still. The doves coo again. They have not stopped, of course. They only remind you that you will keep hearing them until they fade into all the other sounds of the day. Their rhythm is almost like breath, steady, unchanged, not asking to be noticed, yet they're all the same. The sound folds itself into your chest until your breathing matches theirs without you deciding it. Somewhere, very faint, a gourd drum is tapped not in performance, not even in play. Just a hand idly touching its skin, once, then once again. The sound is hollow, soft, nearly lost in air, but you catch it. It tells you that someone else is also awake, though still unwilling to announce it fully. The drum is like a heartbeat lying down, unbothered. The compound settles into its morning state with no signal. There is no bell, no call, only people rising, stretching, murmuring. The chickens shuffle a little more boldly. A goat pulls against its tether once, testing, then stops. The dirt takes on a faint shine as the light grows stronger, though not strong. You notice that colors are still waiting. Everything is grey, soft brown, half hidden. You lean your back against a wall of mud plaster. It feels cool, holding the night in its surface. You let your head rest there. From this angle, you see the roof's edge above you. Straw ends dangling, some broken, some neat, all pointing downward like fingers relaxed in sleep. The roof is not straight, not even, but it does not need to be. The cooing, the rustling, the faint cough, the breath of smoke from someone's early fire, they layer themselves until the silence is not empty at all. You feel as though you sit inside a bowl where every sound is another small seed rolling to find its place. Nothing is loud. Nothing is hurried. The day begins not with an opening but with a drifting, as though you are already inside it and only now noticing. You remain still for a while, but the morning insists on showing you more, little by little. Your eyes drift to the jars set out near the center of the compound. They are not tall, not grand, but they hold more life than their clay frames suggest. Each one stands on a ring of woven grass to keep it steady. Their bellies bulge wide, their necks taper gently upward, and on their sides you see faint smudges from many hands that have touched them. The coolness of the night still clings to them, though the day will soon erase it. The first light does not strike them sharply. It slips along their curves in a thin wash, making the clay look almost damp. You watch the way the surface darkens in patches where condensation gathers. It is a quiet miracle, water appearing where none was poured. You reach out with your fingers, not to drink, only to feel the slick trace of dampness. It leaves your skin colder for only a second before it disappears. Around the jars, women move slowly, balancing cloth around their shoulders. They do not speak loudly. They do not need to. They pass one another with nods, with glances, sometimes with no signal at all, as though each already knows the path of the other. Their bare feet press against the earth with a sound softer than words. When one bends, her bracelets click faintly together, the only metal voice in all this clay and earth. One woman wipes her hand along the jar's neck before she dips the gourd inside. The sound of water shifting rises up, low and rounded, filling the hollow air of morning. She tilts the gourd, pours slowly into another vessel. The stream is not rushed. It bends in an arc, breaks in drops that splash faintly onto the dirt, darkening it in a circle. You watch the patch of wetness fade back to dust in the warming air. The women's eyes are calm, but they are never still. They watch the jars, the gourds, the children wandering near the edges. They notice everything without showing it. One sets down her pot, adjusts the knot of her wrapper, and with the same movement shifts her gaze to someone standing just beyond the gate. Her eyes stay there only for a breath, then move on. You notice because you are watching, but no one else seems to. The jars themselves seem alive with sound. When water is dipped, there is the hollow glug as air pulls itself down into the jar's belly. When a gourd scrapes its sides, you hear a faint rubbing, like fingers brushing stone. These noises are too small to be music, but they repeat over and over until they feel like rhythm. Nearby, a child runs past, his laugh rising like a thin reed pipe. He does not carry water, only dust on his ankles. He dodges between the jars as though they are part of a game, until a woman's voice calls low, steady, enough to slow him without scolding. He slumps to the ground, picking up a stick instead, tracing lines in the dirt that will be gone the moment someone walks across them. The smell of the water is not really a smell at all, just the absence of dust, the coolness that you can taste without lifting it to your lips. You imagine dipping your hands, letting them linger inside until the skin wrinkles faintly. The thought makes you breathe slower. You do not move, but you feel the coolness anyway, simply by watching. The women move the jars a little to keep them in shade. They lift not with strain but with steady grace. 2 hands at the base, cloth cushioning the pot against a hip. The weight is not light, yet no one rushes. Each step is careful, toes pressing into the earth, heels following slowly, balance found in repetition. The water does not spill. The light grows stronger now. It slides further down the walls, touches the ground in wider patches. The clay jars shine less with dew and more with the dull strength of fired earth. Their darkened streaks fade as the sun dries them. You notice that the jars are never truly empty, never truly full. They are always between, waiting for the next dip, the next filling, as if the rhythm of water and clay is endless. A faint breeze stirs, barely enough to move a thread of hair. It passes over the jars and cools the air around them, though only slightly. You breathe it in, holding it longer than usual. It tastes of nothing, but the nothing feels better than dust. The women leave with their filled vessels. Some rest them against their hips. Some carry them balanced with practiced ease on their heads. They do not look back at the jars they leave behind. They know the jars will wait, as they always do. The compound empties again, but the shapes of the jars remain like quiet guards, holding their coolness against the coming day. You stay where you are, listening to the faint dripping inside one jar, the water still settling after being disturbed. The sound is hollow, round, like a drum played far away. You wait for it to stop, but it does not. The water shifts, rests, shifts again. You understand it could continue all morning, long after the women have gone. You stay near the jars, though your attention shifts with the sounds that begin to rise elsewhere. The compound fills not with chatter, but with rhythm. Wooden pestles strike into deep mortars, the thuds slow at first, then steady, then merging into patterns that feel almost rehearsed. You do not see the women immediately. You only hear the sound, carrying across the dust like a call without words. The pestles rise and fall with no hurry. Each strike is followed by a pause just long enough for the grain to settle, before being struck again. Thud, pause, thud, pause. The rhythm is as much breath as it is labor. When 2 or 3 mortars are worked at once, the sounds overlap, weaving into each other without clashing. It feels like listening to more than one heartbeat at a time. Each one strong, each one steady, none rushing ahead of the others. You turn your head and see them now, women standing tall, arms moving with a calm strength that makes the effort seem effortless. Their pestles are long, smoothed by years of hands gripping them. They rise almost to the height of the women's shoulders when lifted, then fall into the mortar with a solid, hollow thump. Each movement is the same as the last, repeated until the sound itself seems older than the morning. The mortars themselves are carved from thick wood, worn down at the rims where pestle and hand have touched again and again. You see the faint polish of oil and grain dust. The air above them swirls faintly each time the pestle strikes, sending up tiny specks of chaff that catch in the light. You breathe in, and the smell is earthy, dry, slightly sweet, the smell of millet giving itself to transformation. Children sit nearby, not helping, only watching. One leans his chin on his knees, staring as though waiting for the pestle to miss. But the pestle does not miss. It finds the mortar every time, because it has been finding it every day for longer than he has been alive. His sister scratches shapes in the dirt with a stick, each line erased by her own hand as soon as it is drawn. Their play hums quietly against the backdrop of the pounding. The women do not speak much as they work. When words are exchanged, they are brief, low, carried away almost immediately by the steady thud of pestles. You see one smile faintly, not at anyone in particular, but at the rhythm itself, as if she has remembered that it belongs to her. Another hums a note, too low to form a song, yet it drifts into the sound of wood against wood, until the pounding feels almost like accompaniment. Dust from the millet coats the edge of one woman's arms, clinging lightly to her skin. When she lifts the pestle high, the dust falls in a thin veil, caught briefly in the sunlight. The sight is neither striking nor dull, it simply is, the way the morning is. You watch as the dust disappears before it reaches the ground, lost in the movement of air. The mortars take turns. One rests for a while, then begins again. The sound changes with each shift, sometimes louder, sometimes softer, but always steady. You find yourself listening for the pattern, waiting for the moment when 2 pestles strike at the same time. When it happens, the sound is louder, almost startling, but then it dissolves back into the weave of alternating beats. The smell of cooking fire edges into the compound now, smoke mixing with the dust. The pounding continues, unbothered. The fire's smoke drifts in thin ribbons, climbing above the huts, curling into the pale sky. For a moment, the rising smoke and the falling pestles seem connected, one pulling upward, one pressing downward, each balanced by the other. You imagine the millet itself inside the mortar, grains breaking, shells loosening, the soft bodies beneath exposed. The sound of the pestle is their small lives ending, but not cruelly. The rhythm is too calm for cruelty. It is only transformation, repeated so often that no one even thinks to name it. The millet accepts its fate as the morning accepts the sun. When one woman pauses, leaning her pestle against her shoulder, the silence of that single mortar feels heavy, as though the air has forgotten what to do without it. But then another pestle continues, and the rhythm reclaims itself. The pause becomes part of the pattern, just another beat stretched longer than usual. The woman wipes her forehead with the back of her hand, then takes the pestle again. The pounding resumes, and the air feels whole once more. The children scatter as someone calls them away. Their absence makes the yard seem wider, the sound of pestles deeper. You notice now how your own breathing has matched the rhythm without you asking it to. Each inhale arrives with the lift of a pestle, each exhale with the fall. The work of others has folded itself into your body, as natural as your pulse. The morning continues in this way, thud, pause, until you cannot imagine a time before it began, nor a time when it might end. The sound of pestles fades behind you as you drift toward another corner of the compound. What reaches your senses next is the smoke. It does not rush at you in a cloud, it drifts, almost polite, curling upward in threads so thin they seem like hair tugged gently by the air. The morning sun catches in it, turning the grey into a pale gold for a heartbeat before it disappears again. You breathe it in, slow, steady, and the scent settles at the back of your throat. The fires themselves are small, no more than circles of stone with blackened earth at their centre. A few women squat low beside them, wrapping their cloths tighter against their legs. They feed sticks into the glowing wood, not hurrying, letting each piece catch in its own time. The crackle is quiet, almost shy, not loud enough to compete with the pestles or the birds. The flames lick at the bottoms of clay pots resting on iron stands, the pots already sweating with the promise of heat. Inside those pots, porridge stirs. The sound is gentle, just a soft bubbling like the throat of a sleeping child. A wooden spoon dips in, circles, lifts and returns again. Each movement is the same as the last, and the smell it releases is warm, earthy, faintly nutty, the smell of millet becoming food. The scent clings to your clothes as soon as you step close. It is not strong, but it is steady, and it reminds you of the mornings before this one, and of mornings that will follow. The women tend the pots without fuss. They glance, stir, glance again. Their faces remain calm, their hands steady. One woman brushes ash from her arm as if brushing away a fly. Another leans back slightly, resting on her heels, letting the heat rise against her face before adjusting the pot with a small twist of cloth. The rhythm is not urgent. The food will be ready when it is ready. No one demands it sooner. Around the fires, children hover, drawn not only by hunger but by curiosity. They poke at the smoke with sticks, chase the shadows it makes on the ground. One boy bends low, blows against the glowing embers until sparks rise in tiny orange bursts. He grins at his own power, though the sparks vanish before they reach his knees. His grandmother calls his name softly, not to stop him, only to remind him that she is watching. He straightens, then slouches back to his game. The smoke drifts outward, weaving with the dust of the compound. It coats everything faintly, though not harshly. You feel it settle on your tongue, leaving a taste that is both bitter and comforting. It mingles with the smell of clay, the faint sweetness of millet, the dry scent of earth still cool from the night. The air is full, layered, but never overwhelming. It is simply the shape of morning here. You let your eyes wander upward again. The sky has begun to claim its color, soft blue spreading from the east. The smoke does not resist. It lets itself be thinned, stretched, dissolved into that blue. For a moment, you cannot tell where the smoke ends and the sky begins. It feels as if the fire is painting the heavens one faint brushstroke at a time. A woman tilts a pot, scooping out a ladle of porridge into a waiting calabash bowl. The steam curls upward, carrying with it a stronger note of sweetness. She hands the bowl to a child, who takes it carefully with both hands. The porridge is too hot to eat, but he lifts it to his lips anyway, blowing across its surface. The breath makes the steam bend sideways before disappearing. He waits longer than he pretends to, then sips cautiously, face unreadable. The crackle of wood sharpens for a moment as a log shifts, sending up a small shower of sparks. The woman tending it does not even look down. Her hand pushes the wood back into place, her eyes already on the next pot. The smoke thickens briefly, then thins again, like a sigh exhaled into the air. You feel the warmth of the fires now, not fierce, but steady against your skin. You let it soak in, noticing how it contrasts with the cool patches of shadow still holding on near the compound walls. You move a step closer, then a step back, balancing between warmth and coolness, as though the two together are what you want most. The porridge continues to bubble, the women continue to stir, the smoke continues to rise. Thread after thread. Nothing changes, and yet everything does, second by second. You realize that you could stand here all day and still the fires would surprise you with new shapes, new scents, new patterns of light. Morning deepens, but the calm does not break. The smoke curls, the porridge hums, and you breathe it all as though it has always belonged to you. You drift toward the wall where the morning has begun to press a gentle hand. The plaster is warm in patches and cool in others, a slow map of sunlight and shade. Hanging there, just above the easy reach of children's fingers, are the leather shields. They are not ceremonial, not made for display, they simply rest, because even a shield prefers a quiet corner when it can have one. Their round bodies curve outward, shallow domes of hide drawn tight over frames that you cannot see but feel with your eyes. The smell reaches you before the textures do. It is the smell of animal skin turned to something stubborn and useful, a heavy, sweet, slightly sour breath of hide rubbed with fat and smoke. There is a hint of tannin in it, a ghost of crushed bark and bitter leaves, as if the trees themselves agreed to lend their strength. It is not unpleasant. It sits in your nose and stays there, the way certain songs refuse to leave after the last note fades. You inhale, and the shield answers without moving. The surface is not smooth exactly. It is smooth the way river stones are smooth, glossy where hands have handled it, matte where dust has settled and been wiped away. You see faint scars running in curves and stitches, thin lines of rawhide that pull the shape into place. The stitches look like a quiet language, one that says hold, hold, hold again and again. At the rim, the hide folds neatly, tucked and bound with a braided thong that circles the whole edge. The braid is practical, yes, but it also gives the shield a mouth that refuses to open. Sunlight falls on the shields in a way that makes the color shift slowly. Where the light strikes, the hide glows honey brown. Where it stays in shade, it sinks into a deeper umber, almost black. The change is not dramatic, just steady, like water deepening in a calabash as it is poured. You lift your hand and trace the air, not the shield itself, following the transition from light to dark as though your fingers could feel it without touching. From behind the shields, a faint warmth radiates, the wall giving back what the sun has taught it. You imagine the inside curve where the hand grip lies, wood perhaps smoothed and wrapped, made to fit a palm that remembers its shape. You picture fingers closing around it, with the ordinary care used to lift a bowl or a child. No ceremony, no flourish, just the weight accepted and balanced. The inside must smell of hands and old sweat, the honest scent of labor. You do not need to confirm it, you already know. A fly makes a lazy spiral near the rim of one shield and lands, feet delicate on the leather. It moves a little, then stops, then moves again, choosing nothing. You suspect it is not here for the smell. It is here for the stillness, the invitation of a surface that promises not to change its mind. After a while, the fly drifts away, and the shield remains exactly as it was, because that is its talent. Someone has rubbed the hide with fat, perhaps shea or tallow. You see the faint cloudiness of it where the sun has warmed the surface. If you touched it, it would feel slightly waxy at first, then dry beneath, hidden strength below a soft skin. There are places, especially near the boss, where tiny decorative cuts make a ring of short dashes. The cuts do nothing to the strength. They only let the owner recognize his own shield from a distance. At least that is the official reason. Unofficially, the pattern is a memory. The dashes echo a hum you heard earlier, the low starts of a melody passed between two people who pretended not to be listening. Decorative, yes. Also a note held in leather. On the ground below the shields lies a coil of rawhide thong, the leftover length from some repair. It has stiffened into a gentle curve and refuses to be anything else. You nudge it with your toe. It shifts just enough to prove it is alive, and then goes back to its chosen shape. You congratulate it silently for its commitment. A young man passes, glances at the shields, and does not stop. He does not have to. His eyes measure them the way eyes measure weather, casually, accurately, without drama. He knows which one is his, even from the corner of his sight. The pattern at the rim, the shade of the hide, the small nick near a stitch where it once rubbed too close to a thorn, these are his names for it. He does not say them aloud. He does not need to. Names can be kept inside where they are safer. You step closer, and the warmth deepens. The sun has climbed enough to lay a clear hand across the leather. You watch a thin line of oil loosen and soak in, vanishing like a whisper, swallowed by a larger sound. The surface gleams for a moment, then settles back into itself. Patience is the shield's language, apparently. It will not hurry its drying to please you. It will dry when it is finished being wet, which, you must admit, is a reasonable policy. From somewhere beyond the wall, a faint murmur of men speaking floats in, the kind of talk that stays near the ground. There is an occasional flicker of laughter, not bright, more like the shadow of laughter. You cannot hear words, only the rise and fall of tone. It blends with the quiet of the yard, with the soft tapping of someone folding a mat against a doorway, with the dry rasp of a broom over dust. In that blend, the shields acquire their own sound, a silence with weight, as if you can hear the decision to remain motionless. On one shield, cowrie shells are stitched in a small cluster, white against brown. They catch the light like tiny eyes that have seen everything and decided to blink very slowly. The cluster sits near the upper rim where a hand would not disturb it. You know that cowries speak about value, about exchange, about luck. Here they also say, remember. The shape of the cluster matches a cadence you have heard hummed under breath when gourds dip water, when pestles fall, when two people pass each other and pretend not to exist. A shield does not sing, yet it carries a tune no one will admit is there. You lean your shoulder lightly against the wall beside the lowest shield and listen to the leather as if it might creak. It does not. Leather creaks when it moves, and this is a day for staying still. If you focus, you can almost hear the soft expansion as the sun warms fibers that would rather remain as they were. It is not a sound for ears, it is a sound for skin. Your forearm feels it as a pressure that is not quite pressure, a whisper of heat traveling through the wall. A hen steps near, pecks once at a grain you cannot see, then wanders off, tail flicking. Her footprints stitch a line of small commas across the dirt beneath the shields. The commas do not form a sentence. They form a gentle reminder that movement continues even when objects choose not to participate. The shields remain. The hen writes her brief note and leaves. You notice the shadow the shields cast. It is not a single shadow but a layered one. The rim's arc, the small knob of the center, the unevenness along the edge where the braid pushes outward. The shadow looks like a dark flower that chose not to open. As the sun shifts, the petals stretch, then tuck in again. If you watched all day and you would see a full slow dance performed without a single footstep. Someone approaches with a small bowl and a roll of cloth. He checks a stitch, tightens it with a tug that barely changes the shape, then rubs the rim with the cloth until the hide warms and shines. He hums, not loudly, not to call attention, only to give his hands a path to walk. The tune he chooses is ordinary, something anyone could hum. It bends at the same place the cowries sit. If another person heard it, they would not think twice. If a certain person heard it, they would think once, and once would be enough. The hum fades, the cloth is folded, the bowl put away. The shield accepts the care, then returns to its occupation of being itself. By now the sun has firmed its hold on the wall, and the heat lifts in thin waves you can almost see. The leather is drier, the smell fainter. You take one step back, then another, allowing the distance to do its work. The shields become part of the wall again, familiar and quiet. They do not ask to be admired. They ask only to be ready when someone reaches for them. For now, no one does. For now, they are simply heavy circles that prefer the company of sunlight. You let your gaze soften until the shapes blur. The shields, the wall, the pale sky beyond the roofline, all of it becomes one field of calm color where nothing insists. The smell of hide, the memory of stitching, the idea of a tune stitched into leather, these drift inside you and settle where your breath is. You stand there doing nothing, which at this moment is exactly the right amount of doing. You turn toward the place the sun avoids at this hour, the seam between wall and roof where dust prefers to live. There the spears lean the way tall grasses lean when no wind asks them to patiently, as if standing were their favorite pastime. Each shaft rests against the plaster with small confidence, angles measured by long habit rather than by any ruler. The corner feels cooler than the yard, dry as a closed gourd. Your eyes settle there, because the spears clearly intend to do nothing, and doing nothing has its charm. The shafts are straight, but not identical. A few keep pale spirals where bark once wrapped tightly. Others darken to deep brown from oil rubbed in by careful hands. Your palm hovers near one, and you can almost feel the residue of shea and smoke, a thin skin that keeps splinters calm. Leather bindings grip at intervals, snug as bracelets, reminding the wood that staying together is still the plan. Above a binding, a faint ridge shows where fingers have rested for years, polish earned the slow way, the kind that never needs to be announced. The iron heads pretend they do not care about light. Iron lies quiet until a thin blade of brightness decides to travel along an edge, and then it moves as slowly as a lizard warming itself. The metal smells faintly of charcoal and earth when the sun finds it. There is a memory of the forge here, not dramatic, just present the way a tune remains in your ear after the drummer has gone home. One socket bears tiny hammer marks, a constellation so regular you suspect intention lives there still. You lean in, the iron answers by continuing to be iron, which is a very convincing reply. You listen, and the stillness gives you sounds. Now and then, a spear settles a finger's width lower, wood whispering against clay with a dry hiss. Another taps its neighbor, a shy clink like two cowries greeting inside a pouch. A gecko travels upside down along the roof beam and pauses to consider this forest of vertical decisions. It blinks, flicks its tongue, and accepts that spears are simply trees that believe in iron leaves. The corner breathes in its slow way, warm dust, oiled wood, cool shadow steady, unpersuaded by the day's opinions. Each shaft carries marks the way a memory carries itself quietly. You see shallow cuts, a row of short strokes, then a gap, then two longer strokes. You see triangles stacked like hills. You see a cord tied in a knot that means nothing to you and everything to the hands that tied it. The designs are not loud. They are tidy murmurs. They tell who cut the wood, who bound the head, who first carried it to the river and back without losing it to mud. They might also tell other things, the sort people agree to hear only if they are already listening. A meeting at dusk, a path kept clear, a word that means yes, but behaves like maybe. From the outermost spear dangles a small tuft hair bound with a narrow strip of leather, darkened by smoke. It is not a trophy, it is something closer to a reminder. When the breeze is generous, the tuft turns slightly, and you watch its shadow turn with it, a soft comma drifting across the wall. If you read punctuation on plaster, you would call this the pause at the end of a private sentence. Near the butt of another spear, a ring of cowries is stitched into a leather sleeve. Their smooth lips face inward, as if listening. Someone rubbed a breath of indigo on the leather beneath them. When sunlight wanders to that spot, the blue wakes for an instant and goes back to sleep, like a secret that prefers drowsing. Two young men step into the corner and stand without hurry. One nudges a shaft a little higher, so it leans more cleanly. His thumb follows the spiral of grain as if tracing a line he already knows by heart. He hums, not a tune really, just a low thread that rises at one point, falls at another, and then repeats. The other answers with scarcely a sound, the kind of assent that could be mistaken for clearing a throat. No one else notices. You notice because you are training your ears to enjoy small things. The first man adjusts a binding tighten, loosen, tighten, and lets the leather take his meaning. The second lifts the sleeve with the cowries a finger's width, then lets it fall. The shells clatter softly, 1, 2, 3, then silence. If you were counting, you would call it a number. If you were singing, you would call it a measure. Either way, the corner now contains agreement. They go, and the spears return to their occupation of being still. You shift your weight, and the dust agrees to move a little under your heel. Through the doorway, a sliver of yard shows a calabash catching sun like a small pond. It would be easy to declare that the most important thing happening today, but the spears hold their case well. Standing still is also a form of importance. Ants discover the base of the wall and begin their deliberate parade, lifting grains larger than their heads. They flow around spear butts, as if around stones in a stream. You watch their not straight paths and admire their commitment to scenic routes. You look closer at the bindings below the sockets. Some are round plates, neat as a grandmother's hair. Some crisscross in an X that repeats 4 times down the shaft. An X that could be counting, could be decoration, could be both. A thin strip has been woven under and over to make a ladder. Ladders usually help you rise. This one only helps your eyes rise along the wood until they forget to stop and meet the iron. If a hand were to rest there while a voice hummed 3 soft notes, the fingers would find steps they already remember. The wood would understand, and, being sensible, would keep the understanding to itself. A small pouch hangs from one spear, a gris-gris tied with cloth faded by sun. No one calls attention to it. It sits there doing its quiet work, which may involve protection, memory, or simply the comfort of a familiar scent near the palm. You are polite enough not to stare, which naturally means you stare a little longer. The knot is tidy. Tidy knots often keep untidy thoughts behaving themselves. The pouch does not argue, it rests, which is a kind of answer. A chicken considers the corner and decides spears are uninteresting. It scratches the floor anyway, because floors are for scratching. The noise is a soft rasp that matches the quiet in a pleasing way, as if the world were being tuned a little. The sun shifts, and a single line of light climbs the wall until it reaches a spearhead. The line breaks there, splits into 2 thin flames that travel down opposite edges, then extinguish themselves at the socket. For a moment, the iron looks almost wet. Then it returns to its usual dry certainty. You nod, as if the spear has performed a trick for you, though you know it will perform the same trick for anyone patient enough to watch. You step back, letting all the spears exist at once. Wood, leather, iron, little knots, small moons of shell, hints of blue. A sleeping tuft, none of it demanding, all of it simply there. The corner becomes a chord made of quiet objects. If there is a song here, it prefers to be felt in the palms rather than heard with the ears. You listen with your hands by keeping them still. The dust settles, the light thins, and the spears keep leaning, very good at their work, which is to wait without complaint and say just enough to those who already know what to hear. You drift from the cool corner of spears toward the place where the shade tree holds its ground. It is an old tree, its trunk thick and wrinkled like a palm that has been clenched too long. The bark is cracked in wide, shallow patterns, each groove filled with dust that the wind has forgotten to claim. Its roots spill across the ground like lazy animals stretching in the heat, half buried, half exposed, as if undecided whether to remain earth or wood. The shade it throws is uneven but generous, stitched together from leaves that filter sunlight into restless patches. Beneath this tree, a few drums rest. They do not speak yet. Their silence is round, full, heavy, waiting. You look at them as though they are sleeping animals that might twitch an ear at any moment. Some are tall, narrow, their skins stretched tight with strips of hide that crisscross down the sides in neat ladders. Others are squat, wider, rounder, as though they prefer to sit heavily and let the air come to them. Each one leans just slightly against root or wall, never lying flat, never too careless. Even in rest, they seem to hold a kind of dignity. The skins are pale, almost yellow in the light, with darker patches near the rims where hands have struck them over and over. You notice faint impressions in the surface circles, dips, soft scars of rhythm embedded permanently. The cords that bind the skins are taut but dusty, some frayed in their middle, others darkened with oil from fingers that adjusted them. You imagine the sound they would give now, if touched, not sharp, not loud, but a low thud, more breath than voice. Yet no one touches them, not yet. Around the tree's base, people sit quietly. A few young men lean against roots, knees drawn up, speaking in voices so low they are almost the same as silence. Their words float a few feet, then vanish into air that does not care to carry them further. One of them toys with a stick, tracing lines in the dust, then erasing them with the flat of his palm. Another taps his finger on his knee, no rhythm, just a habit of skin meeting skin. The smell here is mixed. The faint sweetness of leaves overhead, the dry odor of roots pressed into earth, and the lingering memory of smoke carried on cloth. It is not overpowering. It is simply present, the way air is present. You breathe it in, and it fills your chest without announcement. The drums watch all this with their round, patient eyes. You almost expect them to sigh. They do not. They only wait, their skins warming under the patchwork sun. A fly lands on one, walks in a small circle, and then lifts away again, dissatisfied. The drum has nothing to offer until a hand decides otherwise. Children wander close, curious but careful. One reaches out as though to strike, then stops when his mother's voice calls lightly from across the yard. He withdraws his hand and sits on his heels, staring instead. His eyes move from drum to tree to sky, as if waiting for a sign that never comes. The drums remain still, unaffected, content in their idleness. You notice how their silence is not empty. It has weight. It presses into the shade the way the roots press into the dirt. The drum's quietness gathers around the men sitting nearby, around the children playing half-heartedly, around you as you stand there. It feels less like absence, and more like a pause that could last forever if no one interrupts it. Above, the leaves shift, their movement making light dance across the skins. For a moment, the drums appear alive as if breathing. The patterns of shadow and brightness give them expression. One looks amused, another stern, another indifferent. But then the leaves still, and the faces vanish, leaving only objects again. A woman carrying a bowl passes by, her footsteps firm but unhurried. She does not look at the drums. She does not need to. She has seen them every day of her life, leaning there under the tree, waiting. She knows they will speak later, when the air cools and the people gather. For now, she allows them their silence. Her shadow glances across their skins and moves on. You sit near a root and lean your back against it. The bark presses unevenly against your shoulder, ridged and rough. It holds you up anyway. From here, the drums look larger, their roundness more obvious, their stillness even heavier. You let your eyelids lower slightly, not closed, not open, just enough to blur the edges. The silence of the drums merges with the shade, merges with the rhythm still faintly echoing from the pestles on the other side of the compound. Everything overlaps, yet nothing clashes. The day grows warmer. A thin line of ants marches across one drum's base, their small legs moving briskly, their path unbroken. The drum does not object. It offers itself as landscape. A lizard scuttles along a root, pauses on a cord, flicks its tongue, then leaps away. The cord trembles for a breath, then is still again. The drum remains unmoved, unconcerned. If you listen long enough, you begin to imagine that you hear something anyway. A hum, perhaps, carried by memory rather than air. The drums remember being struck, remember voices rising, remember the feet that followed their calls. That memory lingers in the cords, in the stretched skin, in the hollow belly of wood. You cannot prove it, yet you hear it all the same, a quiet that is almost a note, a silence that is already half a song. You exhale slowly, and the air feels as thick as the shade. The drums wait, the tree waits, the people wait. Nothing presses forward. Nothing asks you to move. You rest in the weight of instruments not yet played, and their stillness fills you the way a sound might. You rise from the root's shade and walk toward the watering place. It lies just beyond the compound wall, a low hollow where water gathers in a pool edged by reeds and mud. The path leading there is worn flat by countless bare feet, the dust tamped down into a smooth ribbon. You follow it without thought, as if your body already knows the turns. The sound changes as you approach the faint trickle of water shifting against stones, the light slap of gourds dipped and lifted. These noises carry farther than voices, as though the water insists on telling the world it is still here. Women stand in small clusters, gourds in hand, cloth wrapped snug around hips. They lean easily, one knee bent, shoulders sloped. The water reflects them in long ripples, making their shapes softer, slower, almost doubled. Some move quickly, dipping their gourds with practiced speed, filling pots for homes waiting behind them. Others linger, letting the water rest in their vessels a little longer than necessary, the surface trembling with tiny circles before settling. You watch one adjust her wrapper at the shoulder, her gourd held against her chest as if it were part of her body. Children kneel at the edges, splashing with both delight and caution. They scoop water in their hands, pour it out again, laugh when it spills on their knees. One child dares to step too deep and earns a quiet scold from his older sister, who pulls him back with a gentle tug of his arm. He protests with a pout, but the water on his skin cools his temper quickly enough. The air smells different here, less dust, more green. Reeds bend in the slight breeze, their tips brushing each other like gossiping neighbors. A frog croaks once, twice, then falls silent, as if embarrassed by its own boldness. The mud smells strong near the waterline, thick and heavy, clinging to toes that wander too close. Yet the water itself holds no smell, only freshness, a coolness that your lungs notice as soon as you breathe near it. Not everyone comes for water alone. You notice eyes meeting when they should not. Two figures approach from opposite sides, each carrying a vessel, each walking slower than the others. Their paths cross not by accident but by arrangement too subtle for outsiders to name. Their hands do not touch. They do not even pause. But their eyes hold for a moment longer than needed, and the silence between them becomes louder than the splash of gourds. You see it. Others do not, or perhaps they do and have learned not to say. One of them hums under breath, so low you might mistake it for clearing the throat. The sound is nothing a fragment, a half note, but it lingers, folding itself into the rush of water poured into a pot. The other lowers her eyes but smiles faintly, the corner of her mouth curving before flattening again. The moment lasts only a breath, then dissolves as if it never happened. Yet you carry it with you, as though you were the vessel holding the sound. The gourds themselves are alive with noise. When dipped, they gurgle and slap, pulling in water with greedy throats. When lifted, they drip steadily, the drops falling like beads onto mud already dotted with dark stain. Some women shake them once, a small flick of the wrist, sending the last drops scattering like tiny birds. Others press cloth against the rim to catch the excess, before balancing them on their heads. You step closer to the pool's edge. The surface quivers where reeds lean too heavily, their shadows slicing across the water in uneven lines. Your reflection joins theirs for a moment, wavering, distorted, then gone as the next gourd breaks the surface. The water never holds on to any one shape for long. It accepts, distorts, releases, forgets. Perhaps that is why secrets find comfort here. They cannot last longer than the ripples. A woman straightens, balancing a heavy pot against her hip. She steps past the pool with careful grace, her feet making no splash even when the mud pulls slightly at her toes. She does not look behind her. She does not need to. The water will remember her only until the next hand stirs it. The figures, with held glances, depart in different directions, pots filled, shoulders relaxed, expressions flat once more. Their pace is ordinary. Their steps are ordinary. Only you still hear the low hum, folded into the air, echoing faintly as though reeds themselves had learned a tune. The watering place quiets briefly. A bird dips down, pecks at the surface, then lifts away with a sharp cry. Circles spread where it touched, fading slowly until the water smooths again. The pool resumes its patient waiting. You stand, breathing the green air, listening to the small chorus of splashes, hums, and silences. It feels like standing in the middle of a secret whispered so gently even the water pretends not to hear. You linger by the water's edge even after most of the jars have gone. The pool looks calmer now, its surface stretching wider without interruption. Yet it does not stay still, it never does. Small currents circle where reeds bend under their own weight. Insects skim the top, their legs drawing faint ripples that vanish before anyone bothers to see them. You tilt your head and listen, not to the splashes, but to something else. There it is, a humming. So faint, you almost mistake it for wind in the grass. It is not wind, it is human, shaped in a throat, carried low. The sound moves like smoke, rising in one curve, dropping in another, refusing to hurry. It is a song without words, though the pauses between notes suggest meaning. You scan the faces near the water, but they are plain, blank, uninterested. You realize this is deliberate. The song is not for them, it is for one. A young man crouches near the bank, rinsing his hands as if he cares only about mud. His shoulders do not move with the rhythm of the tune, yet the sound comes from him. Across the water, a girl bends over her gourd, pretending to adjust the strap around it. Her head does not lift, but her ears do. She hears what you hear. She holds her stillness like a vessel. The hum curls across the pool and into her silence. The melody is nothing remarkable, only 3 or 4 notes, repeated. Yet they do not fall in even distance. They stagger slightly. A long gap here, a short one there. The pattern is not obvious, not to anyone not trained by listening. But she is trained. Her hand moves once along the rim of the gourd, in a rhythm that echoes his pause. She does not sing, but the gesture completes the phrase. To an outsider, it looks like nothing more than a nervous touch. To him, it is a reply. The sound hides itself under ordinary noises. A goat bleats far away. A stick snaps under someone's foot. A gourd splashes into water. The hum fades into these sounds, cloaks itself, then re-emerges. It behaves like a shy animal, stepping out, retreating, then testing the open again. Each return carries a softness that feels heavier than silence. You find yourself holding your breath so the air does not disturb it. The reeds sway, hiding the space between them. The girl straightens, lifts her pot, and balances it against her side. She does not look toward him. She does not need to. He rises a moment later, wipes his wet hands against his cloth, and turns toward the path. He does not look back either. The hum trails a second longer, then stops, as if it was never there. But it lingers, anyway. In your ears, in the quiet, the water seems to hum back now, in its gurgling, in its shifting. The ripples look like notes drawn too loosely, dissolving before they make sense. You stare until the surface smooths, until all it shows is the pale sky overhead. A child wanders by, splashing both hands into the pool, giggling. The sound breaks the spell, if it was a spell. The hum is gone now. The girl is gone. The boy is gone. Only the water remains, unbothered, unmarked, as though secrets cannot weigh it down. You step back, leaving the pool behind. The path stretches toward the compound again. Your ears still ring with the low, simple melody, though you know no one else around you hears it. You wonder how many such songs drift through the air each day, disguised as ordinary humming, buried under ordinary noise. Perhaps more than you will ever catch. Perhaps only this one. Either way, it belongs to the morning now, and you, by accident or by patience, have carried it with you. You step back into the yard where the sun has grown firmer, laying its hands openly across the ground. The stillness that belonged to early morning is loosening. The compound hums with movement now. At the far side, the goats press against the edges of their pen. Their bleating is not loud, not desperate. It is simply constant, like water dripping from a cracked jar. The sound weaves into everything else, refusing to be ignored, yet never strong enough to silence the other noises. The pen itself is nothing grand, sticks driven into the earth, tied with twisted rope and branches, leaning a little but still upright. Dust has gathered thick at its base, worn down by the shuffling of hooves. A few tufts of grass cling here and there, but most have already been eaten. The goats move restlessly, noses pressed through gaps, teeth tugging at anything green enough to pretend it might be edible. Their coats are patchy, some soft white, some speckled brown, some dark as soot. Dust lies heavy across their backs, dulling the colours, giving each goat the same faded look. When they shake themselves, small clouds rise and fall back, the air catching the dry smell of animal musk. It is not sharp, not sour, just the honest odour of creatures who spend every day pressed against one another. You inhale it, and it folds into the other scents of smoke, porridge, and clay. The goats jostle, but without real urgency. Horns click together now and then, a brief reminder that space is scarce. A mother bleats in a softer tone, her kid nudging at her side. He finds milk, latches, and the sound of his feeding joins the chorus, small gulps that no one hears unless they are standing close. The mother lowers her head and chews, unconcerned. Children linger by the fence, throwing handfuls of dry leaves into the pen. The goats nibble without enthusiasm, then sniff for more. The children laugh, not because the goats do anything remarkable, but because laughter is the easiest response to almost everything at this hour. One boy lifts a stick high, pretending it is a spear, pointing it at the largest goat. The animal stares back, blinking slowly, unimpressed. The boy lowers the stick, sighs dramatically, and runs off toward the shade. The goat resumes chewing, victorious without effort. The sound of bleating folds into the rhythm of the compound. It overlaps with the faint pounding of pestles still at work, the bubbling of porridge thickening at the fires, the murmurs of people passing bowls. None of it clashes. The noises blend, forming a low chorus that belongs to daily life more than to any one creature. You notice how even repetition carries comfort. The same bleat, the same thud, the same bubbling together, they make the day feel anchored, steady. Dust stirs when a goat kicks at the ground, impatient. The particles rise, golden in the sunlight, then drift down to settle on everything else. Fence, hides, pots, even your skin. The air tastes faintly of grit, a reminder that the earth insists on being part of every breath. You accept it without thought, because here there is no separation between body and land. One goat leans harder against the fence, testing. The wood creaks, rope strains, but the barrier holds. The goat seems satisfied, or perhaps distracted, lowering its head to nibble again. Its ears flicker to fly, then relax. Life inside the pen continues exactly as it did before. You find yourself staring at the movement of their mouths, the slow grind of jaws, the rhythm steady as any drum. Each chew looks alike, yet no two are truly identical. The goats create a pattern without meaning to, a soundless chant that belongs only to them. If you listen long enough, it almost sounds like words you cannot quite understand. The sun presses harder now, and the goats shift into shadow where they can. Their bleating softens, more spaced apart, as though the heat itself teaches them patience. The pen quiets, though the restlessness does not vanish. It only folds itself into slower breathing, into the twitch of tails, into the occasional nudge of horn against horn. You step back, letting their chorus fade into the larger hum of the yard. The goats will remain restless until evening, because restlessness is their way. And you, for a time, share in it, standing in the dust, breathing the musk, listening to the voices that never change but never quite repeat. You step away from the bleating pen, letting the sounds soften behind you. Near one of the huts, in the place where shadows linger longest, you notice a hand slip beneath folds of cloth. The gesture is casual, too casual, the way someone scratches an itch that doesn't really itch. When the hand returns, it brushes against a necklace hidden deep inside the wrapping. Not displayed, not flaunted, just concealed, carried, waiting. The necklace itself shows only in fragments. A glint of shell here, a bead of bone there, the faint gleam of copper polished by touch rather than oil. The pieces are small, irregular, strung on a cord, darkened with sweat and time. Nothing about it is meant for show. It is the kind of adornment that matters more to the hand that touches it than to the eye that sees it. You watch fingers rub over one bead again and again, circling, pausing, circling, as if that motion alone carries a message. The morning air folds around the secret. A woman passes nearby with a calabash of water balanced on her head. She does not notice, or she notices and chooses to let her gaze slide past. People here know how to see and not see at the same time. You learn that skill too, standing quietly, your eyes pretending to wander elsewhere while your attention stays fixed on the glimmer beneath the cloth. The owner of the necklace does not hurry. He bends as though adjusting his sandal, his hand brushing the hidden cord once more. The beads clink faintly, a sound softer than the crackle of ash, easily lost to anyone not waiting for it. To you, it is clear enough. The sound is not decoration. It is reply and answer to some hum, some look, some signal already passed in the morning. The necklace disappears again. The cloth falls back, neat folds pressing against chest and shoulder. You might believe nothing happened at all if not for the way the hand lingers against the fabric, pressing lightly as if to remind the beads to stay quiet. The gesture is brief, but it holds more weight than any word. Nearby, children chase each other in uneven circles, laughing, tripping, rolling in the dust. Their noise covers everything, makes it safe. A goat bleats again from its pen, stretching its neck over the fence. Someone coughs lightly, clears a throat, adjusts a pot. The necklace hums within its hiding place, unheard, unseen, yet alive. You imagine what each bead means. A cowrie shell, maybe, pressed against lips before being strung, promising silence. A copper bead, worn smooth by thumb, promising return. A bone carved with shallow lines, promising memory. None of this is declared, but the hand knows, the skin knows. Meaning sits inside small objects the way water sits inside jars, quietly, waiting for the right time to be poured. The sun climbs higher, peeling away patches of shade. The necklace owner shifts, moving further into shadow as though the beads themselves prefer it. A breeze slides through the compound, tugging at cloth folds, but the necklace does not reveal more. Its secrecy is deliberate, chosen. You accept this, because not everything is for seeing. Some things live better inside layers. The hand brushes the cloth one last time, then lifts to scratch at the neck, a movement plain and ordinary. The necklace does not show again. It waits, pressed against skin, hidden heartbeat against heartbeat. You know it will speak later, when the air grows quieter, when eyes find each other across firelight or riverbank. For now, it rests, like a song paused between verses. You step back, letting your gaze blur, until necklace, cloth, shadow, and morning all become the same. Nothing glitters anymore, nothing insists. Only a hum remains in your memory, faint and stubborn, like beads touched in silence beneath a fold of cloth. You linger near the shaded wall until the clinking of beads is only a ghost in the air. Then another rhythm rises, a scraping, sharper than the thud of pestles but softer than the clatter of goats. It comes from a pair of young warriors crouched together, half hidden by the shadow of a hut. Their heads are bent close, their knees drawn up, their spears lying flat across the ground. Each holds a small stone in hand, drawing it along the iron edge of a blade. The sound is steady, drawn out, not hurried, a low hiss that begins, fades, and begins again. The iron catches sunlight each time the stone passes. Brightness flashes in thin strips, brief as lightning but calm as dawn. The shafts rest heavy on the earth, their bindings dusty, their cords coiled like resting snakes. The young men do not look up. Their eyes follow the slow work, their hands repeating the same path again and again until the motion becomes its own silence. Their bodies are still except for wrists and shoulders. The muscles there ripple slightly, no more dramatic than water stirred by a fish beneath the surface. One leans back occasionally, spits into the dust, then returns to his edge. The spit leaves a dark mark that dries quickly, erased by the heat before another hiss of iron follows. Between them lies a bowl of water, shallow, its surface trembling with each scrape. They dip the stones now and then, wetting them, shaking off droplets that darken the ground. The water smells faintly of iron, though you may only imagine it. Still, you breathe it in, letting the scent rest behind your teeth. Their voices barely rise above the scraping. One mutters a phrase short, cut clean, more rhythm than meaning. The other answers, not with words but with a hum, 3 notes held under breath. It almost sounds like the rasp of stone itself, though softer, warmer. You realize the hum is not for the blade at all, it is for the ears nearby. The first young man does not reply, but his eyes lift once, not toward the hummer, but toward the corner where shadows deepen. Someone unseen is listening. The hum continues, thin as smoke, stitched between the hisses of stone on iron. The blades grow shinier with each pass. One edge reflects the sunlight in small bursts, scattering them across the wall. You watch the glimmers dance, faint signals that might mean nothing, might mean everything, depending on who receives them. The young men do not acknowledge the light, but you suspect they are aware. Nothing here is without meaning, even when it pretends to be. The sound of goats drifts faintly across the yard. The bubbling of porridge still rises near the fires. The laughter of children echoes at intervals. Yet, under it all, the scraping holds steady, insistent, but calm, a rhythm that asks for patience. You find yourself breathing in time with it, the inhale matching the draw of stone, the exhale following the faint hiss. When one blade is finished, the young man runs his thumb lightly along its length, not to test sharpness, only to feel the smoothness of the work. His hand lingers a moment too long, as though the metal itself carried a message. He nods once, then sets the spear aside. His companion pauses too, lifts his blade, holds it so the sun catches it fully. For a breath, the brightness blinds, reflecting directly into the shadowed corner where unseen eyes still linger. Then he lowers it again, letting the light slip away. No one speaks of this. The scraping resumes. The bowl of water ripples once more, disturbed by a drop of sweat falling from a brow. The hum softens, nearly vanishes, then returns in another phrase, this time lower, almost a growl. The second young man presses his stone more firmly, the hiss longer, sharper, until the hum is hidden inside it. The air feels thicker now, as though the sharpening is more than sharpening, as though it is a language carved into metal for those patient enough to hear. The dust around them glows in sunlight, tiny grains rising each time they shift position. It coats their forearms, their knees, their bare feet. Their breathing is slow, even, as if they draw steadiness from the tools in their hands. You watch until the sounds merge into a single rhythm. Scrape, hum, pause. Scrape, hum, pause. A pattern repeating itself into invisibility, like footprints erased by wind. You turn away eventually, though the hiss of stone on iron follows you, echoing in your chest like a heartbeat that refuses to hurry. You follow a narrow footpath toward the giant that sits rather than stands. The baobab's trunk is pale and broad, its bark a calm skin of ash and milk, smooth in wide plains, rippled where it sinks into the ground. The air turns cooler here, as if the tree keeps a small weather of its own. Light breaks into pieces under the canopy, making islands of shade that drift and settle, never hurried. You step into one, and the sound your feet make changes less crunch, more hush, like speaking with your mouth near a wall. At the base, the roots flare outward and flatten, their backs polished by years of sitting and leaning. Dust gathers in the seams between them as fine as ground grain. A low path has been swept around the trunk. You follow it by habit you have not earned. The tree's presence asks for steady movement, and you oblige. You pause, place a hand on a root, and feel stored night lingering in its surface. Shadows travel here the way water travels over stone-thin, patient, refusing to stay. Some belong to leaves. Some belong to lizards that start and stop without apology. Some belong to people who do not wish to be counted. You see one such shape fold around the far side of the trunk and disappear. Nothing urgent, nothing secret that needs drama, just a person and a path choosing not to meet your eyes. A few breaths later, another shadow follows the same curve at a different pace. The tree receives both and keeps the moment for itself. The bark carries old scars, long-healed splits, edges pressed together like closed lips. In a shallow hollow rests a basket with a fitted lid, its thong tied in a neat cross. It might be someone's, or it might be the tree's for now. Such things often belong to whoever is willing to ignore them. Above, the leaves whisper in small pieces. When wind climbs the trunk, the canopy answers with a noise like dry rain, and the ground below replies by brightening, dimming, brightening again. You listen to the slow talk of light. Leaf shadow, arm shadow, root shadow meet and part. When a cloud thins the sun, the whole drawing softens, as if fingers have rubbed the lines to kinder edges. The smell here is its own mixture. Dry bark, a memory of sap, the faint musk of earlier backs and baskets. It is a catalogue of ordinary that manages to feel important. Near one root, somebody pressed cowries into a curve that echoes the wood's rim, all lips turned the same way. A breath of wind tips one shell onto its back. It lies smooth side up, pretending to be a pebble. No one corrects it. A bird drops to the trunk, reads a crack carefully, finds it uninteresting, and moves on. Its short shadow passes over the shells like a quick hand testing a forehead. A man wanders through with a small thorn in his palm, pinched from a sandal. He places it on a ledge of bark as if the tree collects such gifts, and continues, his shadow stretching, thinning, then vanishing. Shadows are tidy travelers. They carry nothing and leave less. Behind him, a lizard claims the same ledge and flicks its tongue once to agree with the world. The two drifting figures circle the base on different arcs, never meeting yet clearly measuring each other. They pause at the same shoulder-high root, not on the same side. The space between them is the width of a calabash, maybe less. Nothing happens that a sentence could hold. Something happens that a sentence would only bruise. A leaf shadow crosses the gap and rests there for a breath, like a lid set gently on a bowl. When it lifts, the gap remains the same, and that sameness is its own answer. Above, a heavy fruit hangs and sways. You think of its chalk-sweet crumble on the tongue, the way water turns it smooth. Someone will knock it down later, or no one will. The baobab is patient with human schedules. On a cord higher up, a scrap of cloth flutters indigo once, now the colour of sky that has learnt dust. Colour becomes truer here in shade. Even blue remembers itself. You catch yourself listening for a hum, and decide you are not. The tree offers a different sound, the almost inaudible stretch of wood, a slow creak that measures time in lengths longer than human plans. Somewhere close, a throat clears in a way that would be just a throat clearing, if the pause after it were not the length of the first note of a tune. The note does not arrive. The pause remains, perfectly shaped. You slide your palm along a root's smooth back. It is warm where sunlight lingered, cooler where shadow returned. Grains of dust accept your skin and become yours. If you put your ear to the wood, you hear only your own blood pretending to be sap. That is enough. You are not here for proof. A calabash settles near the hollow with a rounded knock. It tilts and rights itself, decides to be still. A narrow blue thread is braided into its handle, the same blue that sleeps in the scrap above. The tree does not comment on family resemblances. It prefers to host them quietly. The figures complete their slow orbits and depart, not together, not toward each other. One steps into sun and grows edges. The other remains in shade long enough to become another piece of bark. The space they leave closes like water filling a footprint. The bark keeps its scars. The basket keeps its lid. The wind keeps its list of small errands. You sit on a low rise of root and let your feet dangle. The bark presses gently against your calves. A friendly insistence. Ants discover you, use you as a bridge, then, being practical, find a shorter route and forget you. You admire their industry without wishing to imitate it. The moment is busy enough with stillness. As the sun leans, The baobab's shadow stretches toward the compound like a slow river. It slides over the cowries, over the place where two people almost met, over your toes. The lengthening shade offers cover to those who want it and comfort to those who do not. You accept both by remaining exactly where you are. The tree's great silence settles around you until it begins to sound like a low song that trusts you to know the next note without needing to hear it. The afternoon arrives the way a heavy blanket arrives without asking whether anyone wants it. You feel the heat settle on your shoulders and then decide to do less with your shoulders, which seems like a reasonable negotiation. The compound blurs at the edges. Everything is present but slower, as if time has stretched itself into long threads and draped them over doorways. You let your breathing follow suit. Inhale with no ambition. Exhale with even less. The air rewards you by being exactly as warm as it promised to be. The ground changes character in this hour. Dust that was friendly at dawn becomes bright and insistent, each grain reflecting sunlight as if auditioning for notice. You learn again the old lesson. Shade is not luxury, it is language. People speak it fluently. Cloths are pulled higher, hats tilt, shoulders find walls that have not yet remembered the sun. A mat is unrolled under the lean of a roof, and someone lies upon it like a note laid gently on a drum, content to vibrate only when the air insists. Sounds grow long and thin. A pestle still rises now and then, but the pause after each thud enjoys being a little longer than necessary. A goat tries a bleat, decides it has made its point, and sits with its legs tucked, chewing at a pace that would embarrass a cloud. Somewhere, a child laughs once, then learns from the heat, and saves the rest of the laughter for later. Even the chickens walk with the caution of small royalty, lifting their feet high and placing them with care, as if the ground might argue. The smell of the day deepens. Smoke, calmer now, hangs close to the roofs. Porridge has long been eaten, and the pots wear their afternoon faces cooler, blackened, retired for a while. The compound smells of clay that remembers water but does not have it, of wood that remembers flame but has chosen peace, of bodies that remember movement and are practicing not to. Sweat becomes a kind of ornament, not visible to anyone polite, felt by everyone sensible. You accept your share and pretend it is a thoughtful gift. You find a patch of shade that is unoccupied and behave as if you have always owned it. The wall behind you shares the day's lesson in temperature, warmth where the sun had time, cool firmness where the shadow won. Your back decides it likes the coolness better. Your face accepts the warmth and drinks it slowly, like a patient elder sipping water. Your hands remember the jars from morning and rest palms up, as if expecting dew to condense out of thin air. It does not, of course, but the posture feels attentive. Insects take over the role of conversation. Cicadas, or their cousins who do not care what they are called, rasp from unseen corners with the determination of creatures who have never considered a quieter option. Their sound is not rhythmic so much as persistent, like a net of thin lines thrown across the afternoon to hold it in place. You listen until their rasp transforms from sound into background. Like woven cloth, you stop noticing once it is wrapped. A lizard scuttles from one shade to another and discovers there is not much difference. You sympathize. Across the yard, someone fans herself with a woven mat. The motion so small it looks like a practiced secret. The fan's shadow touches her face and leaves again, a soft rhythm of light that does more for the mind than for the skin. A boy sprawls on his stomach and draws slow rivers in the dust with one finger. His rivers meander toward a spear butt, decide against bravery, and turn aside. He watches the dust close behind his line, and learns that the earth enjoys being the last word. You notice a strip of indigo cloth hung to dry in a small wedge of shade. The blue is richer there, as if the colour has chosen to keep its strength for those who come close. A breeze tries to find it and fails, moving only the fringe. The threads lift, settle, lift again, repeating a movement that begins to look like breathing. You consider matching it and do. Inhale for the length of a fringe's lift. Exhale for the length of its fall. The cloth, pleased to be influential, continues its modest leadership. Somewhere behind a wall, a calabash tips and rights itself, sounding a low knock that travels farther than it needs to. A reply comes, not from a voice, but from a hand against another calabash softer, a notch lower, nearly lost. You have learnt enough by now to treat this as conversation, the kind that passes for music when the air is too hot for instruments. 2 notes, careful, ordinary, perfectly unremarkable. They drift through the afternoon and settle where attention is allowed to rest. A man rises from his mat and crosses the yard with the deliberate grace of someone who has realized the shortest path is not always the kindest. He pauses beside a shield and presses his palm to the leather, not to move it, only to tell it he remembers. The shield accepts the recognition and returns to being a circle that believes in shade. A woman steps from a doorway, pours a thin thread of water into a small bowl for a child who drinks with the seriousness that heat teaches. The bowl sings a quiet note when it meets the ground again. The note pretends to be unimportant and is believed. You let your gaze soften until everything is gentle. People become shapes practicing slowness. Objects become the reasons slowness is possible. The afternoon discovers that it can be large without being loud. Even flies circle with courtesy, landing only where invitation is clear. Your breath spreads out along the inside of your ribs and finds all the corners it usually rushes past. Your eyelids grow heavier by a degree you approve of. At the edge of your hearing, a hum appears, or perhaps your mind, bored with Heat's sermon, invents one. It is not the clear-coded hum of morning by the water. It is broader, a single note stretched like cloth on a frame, rising just enough to say it rose, falling just enough to prove it can. Somewhere, surely, someone hears the fullness inside that narrow sound and understands what is being said without anyone needing to be interesting. Or perhaps the hum is only a pot settling. The heat allows both answers. Shadows lengthen in tiny ways that only patient eyes notice. A spear's shadow grows a finger, a roof's shadow gains a small step. The shade under your feet becomes a lake that plans to widen. The afternoon admits that it is moving, but slowly, the way a giant moves when no one is watching closely. You thank it for its honesty, and then forget to keep thanking. A low breeze arrives at last, carrying the faintest promise of coolness from somewhere not here. It lifts a thread of hair at your temple, considers your neck, and decides you have earned a small kindness. The breeze tries the dust, tastes the indigo, samples the leather, visits the goats, and returns to you as if reporting. You agree that its findings are accurate. The compound breathes on, everyone holding their energy in the way a drum holds sound after the hand lifts, quietly, visibly, not yet finished. Afternoon has not ended, but it has learned to be generous, and in that generosity the day loses its sharpness. You lie back against the wall and let the heat become a place rather than a temperature. It holds you without effort. You hold it back by doing nothing elaborate. In this hour, that is considered skill. You remain against the wall, drowsy in the heat, until movement in the yard pulls your attention. Hands are busy again, but this time not with pestles or spears. Calabash bowls pass from one person to another, the exchange so measured it could almost be mistaken for ritual. The bowls are not heavy like gourds, hollowed and polished smooth, but the way they are carried makes them feel heavier than they are. Fingers wrap them gently, 2 hands steadying the curve as though the contents might spill even when nearly empty. The afternoon silence deepens around each gesture. One man steps forward, offers a bowl to another. The second reaches out with both hands, receiving it as if it were a secret more than a drink. Their eyes do not quite meet. They hover at the edge of recognition, careful, deliberate. The bowl changes ownership, and the moment disappears as though it never mattered. Yet you feel the space it leaves behind, a small hollow where meaning lingered briefly. Children notice none of this. They run circles across the yard, kicking up dust that hangs in the light. Their laughter collides with the hush of adults, but no one scolds them. Noise from children is excused. It carries no weight. The weight lives in the bowls. Each time one changes hands, silence thickens, stretches, then thins again. You watch the curve of the bowls glisten in sunlight. The gourds have been rubbed with oil, their skins darkened to a shine. When held at the right angle, they reflect shapes, faintly faces, cloth patterns, outlines of huts. The reflections are distorted, wavering, as if the gourd has a mind of its own about how much truth to reveal. You see one figure tilt a bowl slightly, long enough for its reflection to align with another standing nearby. For a moment, reflection and reality overlap, two shapes becoming one in polished surface. Then the bowl turns again, and the image is lost. The smell of water mixes with the faint tang of millet beer. Some bowls hold only coolness from the jars, others something stronger, faintly sour, lightly sweet. Both are accepted the same way, carefully, silently, without remark. A sip is taken, slow, measured. The liquid lingers on the lips, the tongue. The bowl is handed back, or handed sideways, the movement again deliberate. You notice how the bowls travel in patterns that do not seem random. One drifts from hand to hand, always returning to the same figure, as though orbiting. Another remains between two people, traded back and forth without explanation, as if it cannot decide where it belongs. A third is passed casually into a group, then withheld just long enough to mark difference, before being shared again. Each path tells its own quiet story, though none are spoken aloud. Nearby, a woman holds her bowl with both palms pressed firmly, drinking in small sips that stretch longer than thirst requires. She lowers it, wipes her mouth with the back of her hand, and then glances across the yard. Her gaze rests a second too long, the kind of second that bowls are good at concealing. You wonder whether anyone else saw. You doubt it. People are skilled at pretending not to notice what they notice. The air hums faintly with insect life. Cicadas rasp, flies circle lazily, their buzz filling the pauses between bowl exchanges. The sound suits the moment, restless yet repetitive, busy but meaningless. The insects draw no secrets from the bowls. They care only for sweat and crumbs, leaving the heavier meanings to those with hands. One man tips his bowl back farther than necessary, draining it fully, then shakes the last drop onto the ground. The dirt darkens instantly, swallowing the liquid with gratitude. The act feels final, as if declaring an end to something. Yet moments later another bowl appears, pressed into his palms by someone smiling faintly. He accepts without protest. The ending undone, the circle beginning again. The afternoon heat does not relent, but the bowls carry their own coolness. You imagine the liquid pressing against the sides, each sip a promise of relief, even if only momentary. The relief is not the point. The passing is the point, the rhythm of hand, bowl, hand again. A ceremony that insists it is not one. Your own throat dries as you watch, though you are not thirsty. You sense instead the weight of exchange, the carefulness that makes every transfer more than it seems. A bowl of water becomes a sentence left unfinished. A sip of beer becomes a reply not spoken aloud. You understand why no one hurries. The slowness is part of the language. The children finally tire, their laughter thinning into panting. They collapse in a heap near the pen, dust clinging to their skin, sweat streaking their faces. The adults remain steady, hands still busy with bowls. The dust hangs briefly, then settles back to earth. The silence settles with it. The sun tilts lower, but the rhythm continues. Hands extend, fingers curl, bowls glisten, lips touch, silence deepens. You could watch all evening and still find new meanings. Or you could close your eyes and imagine the sound of clay, wood, and liquid passing from palm to palm, a rhythm as steady as breath. The bowls drift back to their places, and the yard sinks again into its measured quiet. The heat eases slightly, just enough for shadows to regain confidence. People find comfort in shade, in stillness, yet from under the tree's edge comes a different sound, low, almost hidden, carried not on air but on intention. A second song is being born. It begins as a hum, one voice only, a thin thread woven beneath the rasp of cicadas. The pitch is steady, neither high nor low, the kind that could be mistaken for the vibration of the air itself. Then another voice joins, not louder, not competing, just slipping into the space beside it like water poured into a half-filled bowl. The two tones linger together, sliding close, parting, then meeting again. You can tell they have done this before. Their patience proves it. They sit in the shade, half turned from one another. Hands rest in laps, eyes lowered. To anyone glancing quickly, they look like two people resting, nothing more. But the song stitches between them, so faint you wonder if even they can hear it. Each phrase is short, like breath drawn across the rim of a gourd. One voice hums a rise, the other answers with a fall. Together they make a pattern too small to call music, yet too deliberate to call accident. Insects swirl overhead, their wings humming in counterpoint. The leaves shift, adding whispers of their own. The voices sink beneath these louder sounds, yet somehow remain clear to anyone who leans their ears with intent. The more you listen, the more the humming folds itself into the landscape, until it is no longer a separate sound but the undercurrent of the afternoon. The tune is not new. You realize this by the way their shoulders relax with each phrase, as if memory is doing the singing rather than mouths. You imagine the first time it was shared, perhaps by a riverbank, perhaps beside a fire when laughter grew too bold. Now it returns, softer, quieter, a familiar shape worn smooth by repetition. Each note is less a declaration than a reminder. I am here, I have not forgotten. One hum drifts longer, stretching like cloth in wind. The other shortens its reply, clipped, teasing. The difference is small, but it carries weight. A smile flickers at the corner of a mouth, then vanishes. Their eyes remain lowered, yet everything in their posture leans toward the space between them, the space the song inhabits. A child wanders too close, chasing a chicken. The hums cease instantly. The voices retreat into throats, swallowed like secrets. The chicken flaps away, the child tumbles in dust, laughter bursts out. The interruption is ordinary, nothing anyone notices. But when the child is gone, the humming does not return immediately. Silence holds its place. You almost think it has ended. Then, after a pause long enough to test patience, the song resumes. Softer this time, lower, as if the earlier notes were practice. And these are the true ones. The voices hum only fragments now, 2 notes, then quiet, then 3, then quiet. The gaps become as meaningful as the sound itself. You find yourself waiting for each return, your ears leaning forward, your breath pausing so as not to miss it. The smell of dust thickens as the air stills. Someone adjusts a pot nearby, someone coughs, someone laughs faintly at a joke you cannot hear. None of it matters. The tune persists beneath, weaving through these interruptions like thread through cloth. You feel it in your chest more than in your ears, a vibration that insists without insisting. The sun lowers another finger's width. Shadows climb higher along the huts. The singers shift slightly, as though the new angle of light requires a new angle of sound. Their notes grow slower, drawn out until each one seems ready to fade forever. Yet they do not fade. They hold, steady as breath, steady as time itself. You realize the song is not meant to end. It will dissolve only when silence becomes stronger, when evening takes the place of afternoon. For now, it is enough that the humming exists, shared between 2 figures in shade, unnoticed by the world, but heard by anyone willing to still themselves. You rest against the tree root, breathing with the hum. Each inhale catches the rise, each exhale follows the fall. The pattern settles inside you, simple, steady, deliberate. The second song is not for you, yet you carry it anyway, folded quietly in the afternoon. You leave the shade of the tree and drift toward the far edge of the compound where cloth has been laid out to dry. The air here smells different, not of smoke or hide, but of something sharp and earthy, the unmistakable scent of indigo dye. It clings to the ground, to the grass, to the air itself, as if the color has a fragrance. You breathe it in and taste bitterness, like a leaf chewed too long, though no leaf touches your tongue. Long strips of cotton hang from wooden poles set across forked sticks. The cloth sway faintly, heavy from their baths, edges dripping indigo water that stains the dirt in blotches. The sun brightens the wet blue until it seems alive, as if the fabric has swallowed the sky. Where folds overlap, the color deepens into black, a darkness that refuses to flatten. Each strip tells a story of patience, dipped, lifted, wrung, dipped again, countless times until the blue decided to stay. Women squat nearby, their hands stained to the nail beds, palms darkened as though they have been holding shadows. Their wrists gleam with faint traces of oil and water, veins outlined against skin that bears the memory of dye. They do not complain. They know indigo lingers, a companion that follows them home, clings through meals and sleep, leaves only when it chooses. Their laughter is faint, stretched thin by heat, yet it carries enough warmth to blend with the color. One cloth is pulled free from the pole, shaken once, twice, the indigo dust scattering into the sunlight like a cloud of tiny stars. The movement is slow, deliberate, and the cloth makes a soft slap against itself before being folded over a line. You watch the dye shimmer along its creases, darker where the folds hide from the sun. It looks less like fabric and more like captured water that decided not to flow anymore. Children play near the vats, dipping sticks into the blue liquid, then drawing lines across the dirt. Their lines are crooked, their hands clumsy, but the color remains, staining the earth. One child laughs at the sight of his stained fingers, bright against his skin. His mother frowns without malice, wipes his hand with a cloth already ruined by dye. She knows the stain will not leave soon. Indigo chooses its own time. The vats themselves sit quiet, clay pots half sunken into the earth, their rims crusted with dried blue. Flies circle the surface but never land, as though the liquid has convinced them it is not worth the trouble. Now and then, a stick stirs the mixture, releasing a smell stronger, sharper, almost metallic. The surface foams faintly, bubbles bursting one by one like words too soft to finish. You watch the foam collapse into itself, leaving behind a stillness that feels intentional. One of the women hums as she lifts another strip of cloth. The sound is not song exactly, more like breath shaped into tone, but it bends in familiar ways. Another woman answers, only with the rhythm of her hands wringing the cloth. The twist of fabric, the drip of dye, the low hum together form a pattern too steady to be chance. You feel it settle in the air, weaving itself into the cloth along with the color. Sunlight plays tricks on the drying strips. From one angle they are flat blue, smooth as still water. From another they shine in ridges, the folds shimmering like the backs of fish turning in a river. The air itself seems tinted. Even dust motes floating by carry a faint shade of indigo before they vanish. You blink, and the world feels bluer than it was a moment ago. The heat presses harder, yet the cloth does not complain. It absorbs warmth, stiffens, waits. One piece flutters more boldly when a breeze slips through, revealing faint patterns stitched before the dye bath, lines and shapes reserved by wax or thread, untouched by color. They shine pale against the dark ground, messages preserved beneath the indigo's weight. To most eyes they are decoration. To certain eyes they may be words. You step closer, close enough to smell the damp cloth itself. The odor is richer here, earthy and metallic together, a scent that insists on staying in your nostrils. You run your fingers along the air just beside the fabric, feeling the coolness where moisture still clings. The edge drips once more, a bead falling, darkening the dust where it lands. That tiny circle will remain blue long after the rest of the earth has turned back to brown. The women work without rush. Each cloth is treated the same, no matter its size or thickness. Dip, lift, wring, hang. The rhythm is eternal, not owned by this day alone. Indigo has its own calendar, and everyone obeys it without question. You watch them move in silence, save for the occasional hum, and realize the cloths are not the only things being dyed. The air itself has become blue, the people within it blue, even your breath carrying a trace of it. You step back, letting your eyes take in the field of cloth, all swaying, dripping, shimmering. It feels like standing in a forest of color rather than fabric, each strip a tree rooted in water rather than earth. The shade beneath them is not ordinary shade. It is tinted, softened, carrying secrets the way only indigo knows how. You circle back toward the corner where spears prefer to lean. The heat has softened to something you can bargain with, and the wall breathes out the day's warmth in slow sighs. Dust hangs lower, as if even it is willing to ease its grip. The spears keep their posture from morning, pretending they have never been touched in their lives. Of course, they have. They show it to any eye that cares to look, and to no eye that hurries. You choose the first kind. A man settles on his heels beside the tallest shaft. He does not announce himself. He is simply suddenly there, as if the spear had grown a companion the way trees grow shade. In his hand is a sliver of bone, thin as a thorn, smoothed to an edge by long use. He draws it gently along the wood, no gouge, only a scratch, a whispering line you barely hear. The sound is dry and fine, like a lizard's toe across a roof beam. The wood answers with a pale thread of dust that clings to the bone and then lets go. The marks are shallow and regular, a short stroke, a breath, a short stroke, a breath, then a longer one that ties the two together. The pattern repeats down the grain until it reaches a leather binding, where it stops and then continues beyond as if the strap were a polite interruption. He does not look around to see who watches. He does not need to. The wall, the dust, the corner, they all approve of this unremarkable activity. Maintenance, anyone would say, if anyone were asking. No one is. You shift a little closer, noticing how the wood smells where the bone lifts a fresh curl cleaner, lighter, almost sweet. It is the scent of inside wood, the part that rarely meets air. Oil on the shaft warms under the man's palm, and the smell of smoke steps forward to greet it. Your nose keeps both, grateful for their peacemaking. The bone sliver taps the leather binding once, twice, as though asking permission to pass. Then it resumes its path. Another figure crouches at the next spear, a younger man with dust on his knees. He does not mark with bone. He uses a nail, blunt and stubborn, coaxed into precision by patience. His strokes are slower, deeper, leaving small shining ridges along the scratch where the wood fibers lift and lie back down. He works a ladder of short lines offset like teeth, then pauses to rub the place with his thumb. The shine dulls, the pattern relaxes, and the ladder looks older than it is. Time is a trade he practices well. Between the two men, silence opens and closes like a gill. They do not speak to one another. They do not need to. The bone says what it must. The nail says what it must. Their tools pause together now and then, the way conversation pauses around a thought that has not decided on a shape yet. The pause is its own shape. The corner enjoys how tidy that is. You look closer and begin to read nothing, which is a good beginning for reading something later. A row of short strokes that stops 2 finger widths from a knot. Another row on the opposite side, mismatched on purpose. A triangle pointing toward a leather sleeve with cowries tucked to its edge, the cowries' mouths inward, listening. A spiral that pretends to be a squirrel's tail, and is likely only that until someone hums the right 3 notes, and then, mysteriously, it is not a tail anymore. The bone sliver traces a curve around a scar where the shaft once bruised against stone. The curve closes into a half moon and rests there. A half moon is harmless, unless you know which night it means. He does. You don't. That is perfectly acceptable to everyone involved. He smooths the mark with the heel of his hand, and the moon goes from bright to old in a single breath. The younger man's nail reaches the end of its patience and chips. He grins at it, as if the nail had made a joke at its own expense. From his pouch he pulls a thin shard of shell, tests the edge against his thumbnail, nods, and continues. The shell's scratch sings a slightly higher note, barely a sound, more a suggestion. It fits the moment better. The pattern he digs now is a path of dots, like seeds set in a line. Counting, decoration, a reminder of a meeting place that everyone will call coincidence. Yes, that will do. Light softens along the iron sockets, making thin halos where metal kisses wood. You watch a spearhead catch the last brightness and give it back in a line that runs the length of the blade. The line slides downward and stops where the scrapework begins, as if light has the courtesy to read before proceeding. Someone clears a throat nearby. Just a throat, surely. The bone pauses mid-stroke anyway to be polite. It resumes with a smaller pressure, a whisper inside a whisper. A child drifts near, watches for 2 breaths, and announces that spears are not exciting at all. He leaves to chase a chicken that already knew he would. The men do not smile, which is not the same as not thinking about smiling. The corner holds their restraint like a small prize. You kneel to see the older marks, the ones nearly swallowed by oil and time. They live as shadows in the grain, a script that refuses to be alphabet but insists on being language. Here a cluster of scratches cradle a knot like hands around a bowl. There a single line refuses to be straight, bending twice at stubborn angles as if imitating a road that must go around something nobody will step on. These are the parts of a day that never mind if they are forgotten by everyone, except those who won't. The bone travels to a place just above a leather ring and draws 4 short lines, equally spaced, calm as fence posts. The hand lifts. The silence thickens. He adds a 5th, closer than the others, almost tucked under the 4th. He sets the bone down and rubs the set with his thumb until the 5th looks less eager and more settled. You admire how much can be said by pretending not to have said it. The younger man ties a new thong just below a scratch he has finished. The knot he chooses is not the neat one you saw earlier in the day. This knot has an extra tuck, a little ear that points toward the wall. If you did not know knots, you would call it messy. If you did, you would call it specific. He pulls it tight, then looser, then tight again. The thongs size into place. Cowries in the leather sleeve click once, twice, once curious, unalarmed. A breeze walks into the corner and goes about cataloguing smells. Oil, dust, iron, old sweat, bark, a late memory of porridge, the faint wet breath of indigo from beyond the yard. It lifts a hair at the younger man's temple, tests the wall, and leaves with nothing to report except that everything is as it ought to be. Good news then. The men lean back and consider their work the way a person considers a horizon without urgency, with a kind regard that includes the possibility of changing nothing. The elder draws one final line, barely there, more thought than mark. The younger presses his thumb into the dots he made and inhales, as if to seep them farther into the wood by breath alone. It appears to succeed, which is satisfying. They stand. Dust leaves their knees reluctantly. They place the spears back into their exact leanings, familiar angles recovered at once, shadows returning to their rightful shapes on the wall. No ceremony, no flourish, only the quiet superiority of objects that now carry more than they did a moment ago and plan to reveal none of it to anyone not already invited. You remain a while longer, letting your eyes blur until scratches become grain, and grain becomes colour, and colour becomes shade. The corner resumes being a corner, the spears resume being vertical thoughts. If you listen closely, you might still hear the tiny hush of bone teaching wood a new habit. If you do not listen, you will still hear it, only later, when night moves through the yard and finds the marks with its fingers. Night is very good at reading. You leave at last, not far, just enough to let the corner keep its dignity. On your palm is a trace of dust you did not earn. You rub it with your thumb, and a pale line appears, faint as a promise. It fades, of course. The good ones do. The light begins to loosen its hold on edges. Huts soften. Fences blur. Even dust settles with a little more kindness. The air cools by a degree you can feel on your forearms. That small surprise when heat remembers manners. You look up, because the sky has started its quiet work of returning things, and birds are very good at being returned. First you hear them, not a chorus, not yet, just single calls stitched far apart, one here, another there, like beads spaced along a cord. A high cheep skims across the yard, barely more than a thread pulled tight. A deeper croak answers from beyond the fence, unhurried, as if it has been saving its voice all day for this one remark. The calls do not compete. Evening prefers cooperation. Along the path beyond the wall, shadows lift from the ground and reveal themselves as wings. Small bodies tilt and correct, as though the sky were a bowl and they are testing its curve. The first flock comes in low, slender forms. sickle wings cutting neat arcs above the compound. They scatter and regroup without thinking. They have always known how. In their turnings, the light catches and lets go, making thin flashes that look like someone's idea of silver. Only an idea, though. You keep your feet on the dirt. The tree that kept its own weather at noon now keeps its own harbour. Birds arrive and choose branches as if the branches had chosen first. Claws find bark that remembers them. The leaves tremble, then accept the weight. Some birds chatter a brief report of the day 3 notes, a pause, then 2 more, all of it having the confidence of information that is useful to someone. Other birds say nothing at all, which may be the better news. Silence often indicates success. From the reed bed near the watering place, wings lift with a rustling that sounds like a mat being shaken. Large shapes rise, legs dangling, necks folded, then straighten and glide to the far bank. The water receives their reflections and wrinkles them into calmer versions, as if smoothing a cloth. You cannot see the faces of the birds, but you can see their certainty. They return as if memory had been laid down in the air for them to follow. The calls grow busier now. Short whistles, soft clucks, a distant booming that you feel more than hear. Each sound is its own instrument, none demanding the solo. A pair of birds scold each other in a tree across the yard, hopping side to side on the same branch until they agree that the left side is finer. Another settles near the roof's edge and combs its breast with a beak that behaves like a careful aunt. Feathers fall in 2 or 3 and drift to the ground with such purpose that you would think they had planned it. Smells change with the light. Smoke that clung low in afternoon lifts and thins. The heated earth loosens a scent faintly sweet, like grain stored well. The hint of indigo remains but has lost its sharpness. Blue can be loud under sun and quiet at dusk. Somewhere meat has begun to think about roasting, though it is only a thought. Your stomach notices and suggests patience. You agree, mostly. Over the pen, the goats give a few evening protests, then accept the inevitable and fold their legs. Their bleats shift downward, spaced wider, as if speech were a resource to be conserved. Chickens choose their beams and repeat the same scratch and hop they performed yesterday and will perform tomorrow, a dance invented by certainty. A child counts them aloud and loses track because counting competes poorly with yawning. The sky above the baobab holds a pale river of birds flying home in a slow, low ribbon. They do not rush. There is still light enough to make choices. You follow their line as it coils and straightens, a path drawn by something you cannot see but trust anyway. The ribbon kinks when a hawk floats from a higher current. The flock braids itself around the danger without scandal, then flattens again. The hawk, realizing it will have to work, reconsiders and lets the evening keep its peace. Sensible. A trio lands near the compound wall and begins the tidy industry of evening. Beaks to wing edges, beaks to back, beaks to tail. The preening makes a dry rasp you could mistake for leaves rubbing. It is a sound that says everything is still in order. One bird finishes, closes both eyes for the pleasure of it, then opens one to check if the others noticed. They did not, which is a victory of the modest kind. Amid these reliable habits, a thin, almost private whistle threads the air. You would miss it if you chose not to hear. It rises from the corner where shade has gathered early, answers from the far side of the yard, and then does not occur again for a while. It does not disturb the birds. If anything, it hides inside their calls the way a small fish hides inside a larger school, visible, invisible, both at once. The tree fills. What looked like leaves becomes half leaves, half listening. The trunk accepts extra shadows on its skin, and the ground accepts the quiet drop of tiny bird litters that turn dust into a map of small decisions. The map will be gone by morning, swept underfoot, rewritten in new ink. This does not reduce its dignity. Evening records everything and then forgives it. Someone nearby hums a fraction of a tune one line, then no more. A bowl meets the ground with a soft rim sound that remembers a similar sound from earlier. Voices pass like the breath of the yard, unforced, barely words. The birds answer with their own soft edits, arranging themselves by comfort rather than argument. You realize how many wings there are only when all at once they stop moving. Stillness, when multiplied, makes a larger sound than motion. The color slips out of things with impressive discretion. Pots turn from brown to almost black, hides from glossy to matte, cloth from bright to smoke-colored. The sky keeps a low fire along the horizon, and then carries it away a little at a time. Birds tuck heads, close eyes. A last tail feather flicks and calls it done. The tree settles with a sigh, that may be the tree, or maybe your breath, or maybe the evening itself finding a seat. You stand a little longer, just to see if anything insists on happening. Nothing does. A single latecomer crosses overhead and lands with that exaggerated quiet birds make when trying not to be judged for lateness. The branch accepts it without comment. The flock expands by one. The equation holds. The first star appears where it always appears if you are patient enough to remember. You are. The birds have stopped reporting. They have surrendered their ledgers of distance and insects eaten and near misses with hawks. Night takes the bookkeeping. In the hush, you can almost hear feathers cooling, a delicate softening that makes the idea of sleep travel. It travels to your shoulders, your neck, your jaw. You take the invitation and do not apologize for it. Calls thin to the smallest shapes of sound, then to none. The sky owns the yard, and the yard agrees. You step back from the tree, leaving the birds to their business of not doing. They are very good at it. You aim to be as good. The evening approves, though it says nothing, which is its custom. The birds have gone still, their wings folded neatly against the dusk. Yet the yard does not lose its voice altogether. Another sound rises faint, but clear, the clatter of cowrie shells spilling from a pouch. It is a small noise, sharp against the evening softness, like teeth of bone striking together. The shells scatter across a mat where someone had been sitting cross-legged, their pale curves glowing faintly in the last light. For a moment they resemble spilled teeth, or small moons dropped too early from the sky. The pouch itself lies on its side, soft leather sagging, its tie loose. A hand moves quickly to gather the shells, sweeping them into the palm, closing fingers around them as though protecting treasure. The hand trembles only slightly, though enough for you to notice. Cowries are common, yet not meaningless. Each shell carries more weight than its size, suggests weight measured not in mass, but in eyes. Eyes that notice, eyes that count, eyes that remember. The shells click together as they are lifted. The sound deliberate now, less accidental. A few roll stubbornly away, spinning into dust. One stops near a child's foot, who picks it up, turns it over, squints, then hands it back. The adult accepts without expression, pressing it quickly into the pouch with the others. The knot is tightened carefully this time, double-wrapped, tucked so no shell dares escape again. A laugh surfaces, light, casual, meant to cover the slip. Another laugh follows, higher-pitched, too quick to be natural. The air holds their weight briefly, then lets them fall. To anyone listening without intent, it is nothing. To you, it is the shape of attention bending one way, then correcting itself. The shells are not returned to the belt immediately. They rest in a lap for a while, fingers rolling them back and forth, each clack muffled by cloth. The sound is soft but steady, like pebbles stirred by a slow current. Every now and then, two shells strike more sharply, a sound like punctuation, full stop, question, exclamation. You imagine a conversation hidden in those clacks, one too quiet for words, but louder than silence. Nearby, firewood crackles as someone pokes at embers. The smell of smoke thickens, mingling with the faint sweetness of roasted grain. These louder scents and sounds are good camouflage. They cloak the shells in ordinariness. A pouch tied at the belt is only a pouch. A handful of cowries is only decoration, or trade, or a game for children. Of course, of course. A breeze lifts the fringe of the pouch and lets the faint smell of leather, loose-oiled, handled, worn. The shells inside knock against one another, restless. You realize they are alive only because hands keep them so. Set them down and they are mute. Roll them together, and they whisper in codes no outsider can follow. One shell slips free again, not by accident this time. It is rolled along the ground with the thumb, pushed toward the edge of the mat, left there shining in dust. Another hand, smaller, slenderer, retrieves it after a pause too long to be casual. The shell is turned once, twice, then set carefully into a pouch, not the same as the first. A twin now lives in a different pocket. No words mark the exchange. The fire snaps loudly, and everyone pretends to be busy with their own shadows. Children play at tossing shells in the dirt, not these other ones, worn thin from too much use. They throw them, count which land face up, laugh at the outcome as though it meant something. Their game is noisy, distracting, honest. The adults' shells are not for games. They clatter once more, then are hidden again, tied tightly, pressed against the body beneath cloth. You notice how the sound stays with you, long after it has ended. That brief cascade of clicking bones rings louder than the children's shouting, louder than the fire's pop, louder than the birds settling above. It clings to your ears, to your chest, a reminder of something carried and exchanged when no one else seemed to notice. The night thickens gently. Shadows grow without urgency, wrapping the yard in calm folds. Cowries remain quiet now, obedient in their pouch. They will not speak again until called. For now, their silence is heavier than their clatter. You carry both the echo of their spill and the weight of their stillness. The firewood crackles more boldly now, sending up sparks that the air catches and then forgets. The compound smells richer, sharper, the unmistakable scent of evening. People drift toward the river path, carrying cloths and chatter. The chatter is thin, only enough to announce intention without bothering the quiet. You follow because the river has begun to call louder than the yard. The path is soft with dust, trampled smooth by many feet. It narrows between reeds and widens again at the bank where the water bends like a slow arm. The air here is cooler, carrying the scent of wet earth and fish you do not see. Shadows lean long across the bank, their edges blurred by the ripple of the river. Warriors gather at the water's edge, stripping cloth from shoulders, letting it fall carelessly on stones. Spears rest nearby, left standing in clusters that resemble small forests. Leather shields lean against tree roots, patient as ever. The men step into the shallows with laughter not meant for anyone in particular. The sound is bigger here, thrown back by the water's surface until it echoes softer, as if the river has decided to repeat their joy in its own voice. Feet slap against wet stone, sending droplets high, sparkling for a moment before returning to the mud. The water is not deep, but deep enough. They crouch, they splash, they dive forward with little grace but much satisfaction. Their skin glistens, dark against the silver wash of evening light. Each movement leaves ripples spreading outward, circles colliding, merging, erasing. One man scoops water in both hands and pours it over his head, the stream running down his back in thin streaks. He shouts at the shock of coolness, then grins as though the water has forgiven him. Another dives beneath the surface, his body vanishing, then rising again farther downstream. His hair drips in ropes, his chest heaves, his smile is wide enough for three. They laugh freely here, their voices unbound by the hush of the compound. Water carries sound differently, it rounds the edges, softens the weight. Even a shout dissolves into something lighter, something harmless. Their laughter grows louder because it can, but it still does not wound the evening. It folds neatly into the rhythm of splashes, the low croak of frogs, the thin song of crickets rising nearby. A boy too young to hold spear or shield wades at the edge, imitating each movement with solemn pride. He slaps the water as if striking an enemy, then wipes his face with both hands, pretending not to care about the droplets clinging to his lashes. The older men chuckle at his seriousness, but they let him be. The river is kind to learners. The air smells of wet clay now, stronger than anything from the yard. It clings to your nostrils, heavy but clean. When one man rubs his arms with handfuls of mud, the scent grows stronger, coating him in the river's skin. He rinses, and the water accepts the mud back without protest. The sun lowers further, painting the surface with bronze streaks. The reflections break instantly under each splash, yet return just as quickly, patient, endless, A line of birds skims the river's curve, wings brushing close enough to ruffle the water. The men watch, heads tilted, then return to their splashing. Even beauty can be treated as ordinary when it is this constant. One figure stands apart, closer to reeds, water only at his calves. He leans forward, palms resting on his thighs, eyes on the current. His lips move faintly. No sound rises above the laughter, but his mouth shapes something anyway. A song, perhaps, too private to share aloud. The reeds bend, as if listening more carefully than the men who bathe. The water carries away the day's dust from their skin, but it cannot carry away the weight of meanings left unspoken. You see this in their pauses, when laughter fades for a heartbeat, when hands linger too long on water, when eyes wander without aim, but rest somewhere particular. Then laughter returns louder, covering those pauses the way ripples cover stones. The river does not mind, it accepts secrets as easily as mud, carrying them downstream, dissolving them into silence. Frogs croak again, more insistent now, as if competing for the right to narrate the evening. The men ignore them, busy with their own noise. You stand back, breathing the damp air, watching ripples chase each other to shore. Soon they will leave the water, shoulders dripping, cloth stuck damp against skin. For now, they remain, still splashing, still laughing, still pretending the river holds nothing more than coolness. You know better. You have learnt to hear what hides beneath laughter. But you keep it to yourself, letting the river keep its calm disguise. They step from the water slowly, as if reluctant to trade the coolness for the thick warmth of night. Drops slide from their shoulders, catching the last gold of the sun before vanishing into the dust. Cloths are thrown loosely back over damp skin, sticking for a moment before settling. Spears are gathered again, shields reclaimed. The men carry themselves lighter, as though the river has rinsed more than dust away. The walk back toward the compound is quiet at first. Feet press into the softened path, leaving faint dark prints that will dry by morning. Frogs call louder now, filling the air with their one-note insistence. Fireflies begin their cautious blinking, brief lanterns without weight or heat. The men speak in murmurs, their laughter smaller, as if even they feel that evening has softened their edges. You follow the line of shoulders moving ahead, catching the faint rhythm of jingling ornaments, beads at a wrist, bronze rings clinking against each other. Each sound seems sharper now that voices have fallen low. The path curves, and the compound's fires begin to glow faintly in the distance, sparks licking upward like restless messengers. They settle in the open yard again, not far from the cooking fire. Mats are unrolled with careless hands, shields propped nearby. Someone shakes a gourd rattle softly, more to test the sound than to begin a rhythm. The beads inside tumble with a hollow patter, like pebbles tossed into a shallow pool. A few heads lift, then lower again, satisfied. From the shadows near the fence, you hear the start of a song. Not loud, not meant to draw attention, but there it is. A man hums, barely opening his mouth, the sound pressing through his teeth like a secret too heavy to stay inside. He does not sit among the others, he leans back against a post, half hidden. His hum bends and wavers, not quite forming words. Others notice, of course. A couple of men tilt their heads, smiling without comment. One shakes his own rattle in time, lightly, no more than acknowledgement. Another clears his throat as if considering joining, but then lets the impulse fade. The hum continues, steady, looping, weaving into the air until it feels like part of the night's chorus. The fire catches stronger now, throwing faces into orange relief. Shadows tremble across the ground. The air smells of roasted millet, of fish drying on racks, of earth still damp from the river. It is a heavy, nourishing scent, as ordinary as it is comforting. Someone adjusts the logs, and sparks leap upward, vanishing into the dark like eager stars. The hum at the post shifts, lips open wider, and fragments of words escape. They are not full lines, not enough to call a song, but more than a hum. Fragments about journeys, about paths that do not return, about eyes that do not forget. Words common enough to pass as any song, vague enough to remain safe. Still, the tone carries weight that a hum alone cannot. No one interrupts. This is the kind of song that carries itself, that does not demand applause. Men stretch out on mats, some listening with half-shut eyes, others rubbing oil into arms and shoulders, unconcerned. Yet you can see how their bodies shift slightly toward the sound, ears tilted, the way people lean toward warmth without realizing. The singer pauses to sip from a calabash, then resumes, softer now. His eyes stay fixed beyond the fire, somewhere in the dark. Perhaps he looks toward the river. Perhaps he looks nowhere at all. His words blend into the crackle of firewood, into the buzz of night insects, into the small sighs of men preparing to sleep. The rhythm of rattles fades until only his voice remains, low and steady. It folds over itself like weaving, repeating lines, then bending them into slightly new shapes. You sense that not all the words belong to the open yard. Some are placed carefully, meant to be heard by only one or two, though the air carries them to all. That is the trick of such singing. Everyone hears, but not everyone understands. Someone laughs suddenly, not at the song but at his own private thought. It breaks the moment, yet does not ruin it. The singer continues, unbothered, his words unfurling with the same calm pace. You feel the yard soften around him, as though even the ground has grown more patient to carry the weight of this quiet ritual. The fire lowers slightly, embers glowing in the pit. The men's voices fade further, replaced by the sound of shifting mats, the creak of wooden bowls, the steady stream of the singer's voice. It is not a performance, not entertainment. It is simply the night, taking on the shape of a song that does not ask to be remembered, but will be anyway. You breathe in the heaviness of it, the softness, the strange mixture of closeness and distance. You hear words, but do not need to hold them. You let them move through the night air like drifting smoke, carrying meaning for someone else, leaving you only with calm. The night deepens around the compound, yet voices still hover like low embers, glowing but never flaring. The singer by the post has softened now to a steady hum again, as if retreating into himself. The fire cracks lazily, dropping ash in small bursts that fall onto the packed earth. Smoke drifts unevenly, sometimes brushing your face, sometimes slipping away unnoticed. The men lying on mats begin to sprawl in the way of tired bodies, ankles crossed, arms folded behind heads, shields pulled closer out of habit. No one truly speaks now, only a word here or there, shared between those who cannot yet surrender to silence. But even those words carry the texture of slowness, like pebbles rolled back and forth by water, worn down until only the smooth surface remains. At the edge of the yard, a woman passes, balancing a bowl covered with cloth. She does not stop, does not greet, only moves quietly toward the women's area. The men watch her for a moment, eyes following the calm sway of her steps. The song hum stretches toward her, a little brighter, then drops back down again as she disappears behind the fence. No one comments. Some things do not need commentary. The crickets thicken their chorus, and frogs add their throaty undercurrent. Above, the sky is no longer purple but a velvet black, speckled with stars that seem sharper in the absence of wind. The air cools slightly, though warmth still clings to the ground. You notice how the warriors shift, pulling cloth tighter around their shoulders, as though wrapping themselves not only against air but against the weight of the long day. The singer has changed tone once more. It is softer, more deliberate, a kind of half-sung recitation. Each phrase is held longer, stretched out until it nearly dissolves. The words speak of waiting, of shadows that hold secrets, of the rhythm of steps when no one else is listening. They are vague enough to pass as nothing more than idle poetry, but the pause between each line lingers too heavily to be accidental. One of the younger warriors glances toward him, lips pressed in a faint smile, then looks away. Another chuckles under his breath, though not mockingly, more as if he has recognized a detail that others have not. The song continues, unbothered, circling back on itself. It is as though the voice is building a wall of sound thin enough to see through but strong enough to hide behind. The rest of the men treat it like background. Some stretch, some scratch absent-mindedly at arms and calves, some close their eyes already. The music folds into the rhythm of their breathing, into the occasional cough, into the creak of leather straps being adjusted for comfort. Nothing interrupts it fully, nothing silences it either. The fire dips lower. Someone adds a log, but only half-heartedly. Sparks leap up and vanish into the star-filled dark. Shadows spread wider, covering faces until only outlines remain. The singer's voice feels almost detached now, floating above the ground, detached from body, detached from place, yet rooted in its own persistence. You sit within it, feeling time slide slower. The night does not move in steps but in gentle stretches, each breath marking distance. The song continues, and you notice the repetition is not just habit, it is safety. To repeat is to anchor. To repeat is to avoid saying too much. Each return to the same phrase is like pulling a blanket higher, covering what lies beneath. No one asks him to stop. No one asks him to continue. The song is allowed to live at its own pace, without judgment. It fills the compound like mist, felt more than seen, lingering without form. It becomes less a performance and more a condition of the night itself. You breathe it in as you would smoke, as you would the smell of roasting grain, as you would the faint sweetness of a nearby gourd of beer. Eventually, the singer lowers his head, letting the hum fade. It does not end. It simply slips away, leaving only silence to notice how full the night had been. The yard exhales as one, though no one comments. It is as though they had all agreed that silence would say more than thanks. You notice the stillness now, the stillness of bodies finally at rest, the stillness of fire coals glowing low, the stillness of night creatures taking their place without interruption. You notice how the ground feels firmer, how the air feels heavier, how the faint aftertaste of song still clings, even though no sound remains. It is not absence, it is presence of quiet. The night continues in its wide, steady stillness. The warriors shift on their mats, some rolling to one side, some letting out a long sigh that seems heavier than needed. You sit with them, feeling how the silence grows softer rather than sharper, how it rests on the skin like cool dew. The fire is now mostly embers, dull red and orange, with an occasional crackle that feels almost like an afterthought. A young man hums under his breath, not a full song, not even an echo of the earlier music, just a single note repeated lazily, as though his lips cannot help but follow the memory. It is nothing bold, nothing claimed. It drifts away as easily as it appears, the sound absorbed into the breathing of those around him. Far beyond the compound wall, you imagine another group of men in another village doing the same thing. Their fire lower, their voices softer, their thoughts not entirely different. The repetition comforts you, as if each night is simply part of one longer night, spread across lands, tied together by the same patience of sound. The stars above flicker steadily. One of the warriors lifts his head, gazes for a moment, then settles again, perhaps seeing a pattern in the sky, perhaps not. A calm weight falls over everyone, and you realize that the earlier songs, the secret tones, have done their work. They have filled the evening, stretched it out, and left enough space now for rest to settle in. Your eyes grow heavy in the way of people who have let enough time pass. Nothing urgent presses forward, nothing interrupts. The hum fades, the embers dim, and the yard seems to breathe itself into quiet. Morning does not rush. It enters slowly, with the faintest blue threading into the black sky. The men shift as the roosters call, the compound walls catching the first dull light. You open your eyes to see shadows soften. The mats are creased, the shields and spears resting in neat disorder by the posts. A woman brings water in a calabash, the sound of it sloshing more awake than any voice. She sets it down, and men come forward with cupped hands, splashing their faces. Some mutter greetings, though still half asleep. Their voices are rough with night, softened by the hours of breathing dust and smoke. The singer from last night sits upright, stretching, his eyes calm. He does not hum now, he does not need to. The memory of his tone lingers like mist, unspoken but still here. Others glance at him, not directly, but with the quiet acknowledgement of those who heard what was not meant to be named. The light grows brighter, showing the worn sandals, the faded cloth, the tired yet steady bodies. Breakfast comes porridge thick with millet, shared from large bowls. The men eat slowly, dipping, swallowing, leaning back, repeating. The morning is gentle. Even in daylight, no one speaks of the night song. It is as if the silence now protects what the darkness once carried. By midday, the air grows heavy. The warriors move lazily, mending straps, rubbing oil into spear shafts, sitting in long stretches of quiet. The compound smells of dust warmed by sun and grain being ground by women at the far edge. One man, younger than most, taps lightly on a drumskin stretched over wood. It is not drumming for performance. It is idle, careless, almost the way one scratches an itch. Yet each tap seems to echo, soft but noticeable, like small drops of rain before a storm. The others hear, but none object. You watch as his rhythm finds itself. Tap, pause, tap, tap, longer pause. It is nothing grand, but it threads into the space like the songs had before. No one sings this time, no words follow, only the drum, casual and incomplete, marking time that does not need to be marked. The air vibrates gently, the sound carrying farther than you expect. A bird calls in reply, or maybe coincidence. A child giggles at the edge of the compound, repeating the taps with small claps of hands. The warriors look up, faint smiles on lips that barely move. The day feels slower, wrapped in rhythm, as though even the heat has chosen to listen. When evening comes, food is prepared again. Bowls of stew passed around, pieces of bread dipped and chewed, chatter soft but warmer now. The warriors' shoulders ease, their bodies less burdened by heat. Someone begins whistling a thin sound, not sharp, not high, but steady. The tune drifts without hurry, sliding from one note to another. The whistling is casual, yet all at once it feels like part of the same hidden current that ran through the songs the night before. The others hear and do not interrupt. They let the notes bend, rise, fall, as if the air itself carries them where needed. You close your eyes, letting the sound merge with the smell of roasted meat, the warmth of fire smoke. The whistling is unremarkable, yet because of its unremarkableness, it feels safe. No one asks the whistler to stop, no one asks him to explain. It hovers above bowls, over laughter, into the dusk where the sky fades from gold to deep grey. The night grows full again, and you know the pattern is set. Some form of song, some form of sound will always slip between silence and speech. Never named directly, always allowed to live in this gentle twilight. Later in the night, when shadows stretch long and the compound begins to still once more, two voices rise in harmony. They are not loud, not insistent, just parallel lines of sound weaving above the mats. One voice is deeper, carrying the steady ground. The other is lighter, bending around it, almost playful. The men nearby listen but do not move. Their breathing slows, matching the rhythm. The harmony is not perfect sometimes. The higher voice drifts, sometimes the lower lags, but the imperfections make it softer, more real. The firelight flickers on their faces, showing eyes closed, lips relaxed. You can hear how the two singers adjust to each other, careful not to overwhelm, careful not to reveal too much. The harmony is its own kind of secret, obvious to hear, but impossible to pin down in meaning. When the song fades, silence does not feel empty. It feels heavier, richer, as though something invisible has passed through and left a trace. You lie back, watching the stars lean closer, and feel how easily sound can shape space without claiming it. The days blend. Each morning, slow greetings, slow meals. Each afternoon, idle repairs. The air thick with heat. Each evening, another small thread of sound slipping through. Sometimes it is humming, sometimes tapping, sometimes whistling, sometimes two voices joining. You notice how none of it is spoken about. The songs live without being acknowledged. They are part of the routine, like the water jars being refilled, like sandals left by the door. They are not decoration, not display, they are simply woven into being. Even the children sense it. They mimic the hums when playing, they tap sticks in uneven rhythm, they whistle clumsily, laughing when it squeaks. The men let them, never correcting, as though passing along something that cannot be taught directly. Night after night, the compound is folded into this slow weave of sound and silence. Nothing dramatic occurs, nothing is revealed, only the sense that life continues, cushioned by the hidden songs that no one admits but everyone knows. The final night of this stretch arrives with no announcement. The fire burns low, the mats spread wide. Men settle into their places, women finish their chores beyond the fence, the air cools in its steady rhythm. The singer from the first evening hums once more, almost as though completing a circle. His voice is softer now, aged by the nights before. He does not sing words, only tone, only sound, stretched out into the quiet. The others listen without reacting, letting it sink into the soil and the sky alike. The hum lowers, then lifts, then lowers again, like breath itself. It does not end with a final note, it simply drifts away, leaving the silence intact. Around you, the warriors exhale, their eyes closing, their bodies yielding to rest. The compound is wrapped in stillness, yet filled with something more than silence. You sense it in the embers, in the cool ground, in the faint rustle of cloth. The songs have left no trace to point to, yet everything carries their weight. You drift into that same rhythm, the boundary between waking and sleep softened, stretched, undone. The night folds inward, and with it your senses soften. You are no longer counting voices or tracking rhythms, only drifting with them. The compound has become a blanket of its own, the faint smell of smoke, the low warmth of earth, the steady hush of breathing. The hidden songs do not need to be named, and they do not need to last. They move like a river underground, unseen but always shaping the soil above. You realize now that their strength lies in being unclaimed. No one boasts of them, no one marks them, yet every man, every child, every ear carries them forward. As your eyes close, you feel how the world itself hums in the same way. The wind in the grass, the rustle of cloth, the quiet thump of a heart. All sound and all silence meeting in one long thread. And so you rest, not alone, but inside that current, carried not by words, not by display, but by the secret music that belongs to everyone and no one. The night deepens, sleep takes you, the song continues without needing you to follow. We hope this glimpse into old customs has been a calm and pleasant one. If it made you curious for more, you can like, share, or leave a kind comment. And if you wish, subscribe to be here for the next unhurried tradition we explore together. End of script. Sweet dreams.